What if the future of America, maybe even the world, hung on a single secret meeting? And what if only one person held the power to change everything? Imagine this. Everything you've ever built, every single battle you fought, all those sleepless nights spent chasing an impossible dream. Suddenly it all boils down to one choice. A choice made behind closed doors. A decision that the world might never even know happened. These were the heavy questions echoing in the chilled night air at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. It was well past midnight. The sprawling campus was almost silent. Just a low hum from distant machinery and the faint, scattered clatter of engineers pulling an all-nighter. Most people, of course, would have been deep asleep. But Elon Musk, well, he didn't sleep like most people. Under the harsh, almost sterile fluorescent lights of a private engineering bay, he stood with his sleeves rolled up. He was staring intently at a half-assembled Raptor engine, looking at it not just as a piece of metal, but as if it were a living thing ready to speak to him. But tonight his mind wasn't on rockets. He wasn't thinking about Mars or Tesla or launch schedules or production timelines. No, he was wrestling with something far heavier, the kind of thoughts that only find you when the rest of the world has finally gone quiet. Just hours earlier, a black unmarked SUV had slipped silently onto the SpaceX campus, its tinted windows hiding the identity of its occupants. It pulled up to a discreet side entrance, far from the main lobby. Two figures in dark, impeccably tailored suits emerged. They weren't investors, they weren't press, and they certainly weren't engineers. They carried themselves with an air of quiet, undeniable authority, the kind that doesn't need to be announced. They were from Washington. Their meeting with Musk was brief, intense, and completely off the record. It took place in a secure conference room, swept for any listening devices. No phones, no assistants, just Musk and the two silent men. They didn't come with a proposal. They came with a problem, a big one. A national security crisis was brewing, a situation so delicate that it threatened to destabilize global alliances and put the country at a severe disadvantage. The details were classified at the highest level, but the core of the issue was clear. America needed a technological leap, and they needed it yesterday. They weren't asking him to build a weapon. It was more subtle, and in many ways more profound than that. They needed access to a specific piece of SpaceX's proprietary satellite technology, a key. A key that could unlock an unprecedented level of global surveillance and communication, giving the U.S. an unassailable edge. But handing it over meant crossing a line Musk had always sworn he wouldn't. It meant putting his global network, a system he envisioned as a tool for connecting humanity, into the hands of a government for purposes he couldn't fully control. It was a deal with the devil, cloaked in patriotism. The men didn't threaten him, not directly. They didn't have to. They spoke of duty, of necessity, of the greater good. They painted a stark picture of what could happen if their rivals gained the upper hand. They left the final choice to him, but the weight of their words was suffocating. As their SUV disappeared back into the night, it left behind a silence heavier than any rocket. And that's what brought him here to the engineering bay, staring at the guts of a machine designed to take humanity to another planet. The Raptor engine was a symbol of his ultimate dream, a multi-planetary species, a future for humanity beyond the squabbles of Earth. It represented hope, progress, and a united human endeavor. But the request from Washington, that was all about the old world. Power, control, division. The very things he was trying to help humanity transcend. He ran a hand over the cold, smooth metal of the engine casing. His entire life had been a series of calculated risks, betting his fortune on SpaceX when it was just a crazy idea, pushing Tesla to the brink of bankruptcy to mass-produce the Model 3. He was a gambler, but he always gambled on his own vision, on his own terms. This was different. This was someone else's game with rules he didn't write. If he said yes, he would be betraying a core principle. The Starlink network was meant to be a global utility, a force for democratization, bringing internet to the unconnected and empowering people everywhere. To allow it to be weaponized, even defensively, felt like a corruption of its very soul. It would make him a contractor for the military-industrial complex he so often criticized. his partners, his employees, the millions of people who believed in his vision of a better future. He would be lying to all of them by omission. The secret would eat away at the foundation of everything he'd built. But if he said no, the men from Washington hadn't spelled out the consequences, but he could imagine them. The immense pressure, the regulatory hurdles that would suddenly become insurmountable, the national security reviews that would grind his operations to a halt. They could bleed him dry without ever leaving a fingerprint. And beyond the personal risk, there was the burden they had placed on him. What if they were right? What if his refusal led to a catastrophe that he could have prevented? Could he live with that? Could he place his own idealistic principles above the potential safety of millions? It was a classic trolley problem, but on a planetary scale. Sacrifice one core value to potentially save countless lives, or hold fast to your ideals and risk an unknown but possibly devastating outcome. He walked over to a large monitor displaying a real-time global map. Thousands of tiny blue dots moved in elegant, intersecting orbits around the Earth. His satellites, a constellation of his own making, a web of light encircling the globe. It looked so peaceful from here, so pure. He zoomed in, watching the data streams, the packets of information flowing across continents and oceans. He saw schools in rural Africa getting online for the first time, remote clinics in the Amazon connecting with specialists, scientists in Antarctica sharing data in real time. This was the dream. This was the promise. Could both be true? Could this network be a tool for global good and, simultaneously, a silent guardian for one nation? He always believed technology was neutral. Its morality was determined by how it was used. But was that just a convenient self-deception? By creating this powerful tool, had he inadvertently created the ultimate weapon? He thought about the history of great inventors. Nobel, who created dynamite and then spent his fortune trying to promote peace. Einstein, whose theories on relativity paved the way for the atomic bomb, a reality that haunted him until his death. Were all great leaps forward destined to be co-opted by the machinery of power and conflict? Was this just the inevitable price of progress? A young engineer barely out of college walked by carrying a laptop. She saw him and hesitated, her eyes wide. "Sorry, Mr. Musk. Didn't mean to disturb you." Elon looked at her, a flicker of a smile on his face. "No, it's all right, Sarah. Keep up the great work. What you're doing here, it matters." She beamed, a look of pure inspiration on her face, and hurried on. The interaction was a small thing, but it cut through the noise in his head. He wasn't just building rockets and satellites. He was building a culture, a team of people who believed in the impossible. People like Sarah who were pouring their hearts and souls into this mission not for a government contract, but for the dream of a better future. What would a decision made in secret do to that spirit? The first rays of dawn were beginning to creep over the horizon, painting the California sky in shades of orange and pink. The long night was ending, and a decision had to be made. He pulled out his phone. It felt impossibly heavy in his hand. He had 2 numbers he could call. One would connect him to a secure line in Washington, D.C., where his yes would set in motion a chain of events that could reshape global power for a generation. The other was to his lead engineer for Starlink, to begin work on a new, radical encryption protocol, one that would make the system a true black box, impenetrable even to its creators. A no that would be heard not in words, but in code. He stood there for a long moment, the fate of his company, and perhaps much more, resting on the next tap of his finger. He looked back at the Raptor engine, now catching the first light of the new day. It was a machine built to escape, to go up, to leave the old world and its old problems behind. And in that moment, he knew what he had to do. The choice wasn't about choosing between 2 bad options. It was about choosing who he wanted to be and who he wanted humanity to become. He took a deep breath, his thumb hovering over the screen. The world would never know about the meeting or the choice he was about to make, but he would know. And sometimes that's all that matters. Thanks so much for watching. This was a little different, a bit of a thought experiment. What do you think he chose? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories that explore the intersection of technology, power, and humanity, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you do not miss our next video. We'll see you in the next one. Imagine the weight of the world on your shoulders. Not metaphorically, but literally. The fear that one brilliant mistake, one single misuse of a breakthrough, could fundamentally alter the course of human civilization. For some, this is a distant, philosophical concept. For Elon Musk, it's just another Tuesday. The silence of his office, a sanctuary of thought and innovation, was suddenly shattered by a sharp, electronic ping. His eyes darted to his secure personal terminal. It wasn't just any notification. The screen glowed with the signature of an encrypted call, a digital handshake reserved for a handful of people on the entire planet. At first, a flicker of annoyance. A glitch, maybe? Technology, even his, wasn't perfect. But then, the screen pulsed, bathing the room in an urgent crimson light. The words, Priority Alpha, U.S. Executive Request, burned onto the display. A deep frown creased his forehead. Government alerts weren't exactly a novelty in his line of work. But this specific code, Priority Alpha, he had seen it only once before, a chilling ghost from the past. Years ago, back when his rockets were still more prone to spectacular explosions than graceful landings, when the chorus of doubt was louder than any applause, that same code had flashed. It was a classified warning about a massive foreign cyber attack aimed at crippling SpaceX. This level of urgency, this ghost from the machine, meant only one thing. Something was terribly, catastrophically wrong. He took a steadying breath and answered the call. The voice that came through was exactly as you'd imagine. Calm, measured, authoritative, and unmistakably federal. There was no room for small talk, no preamble. Mr. Musk, we need you to come with us immediately. Transportation is en route. It wasn't a question, it wasn't a debate. It was a command, politely wrapped in the guise of a request. The gears in Elon's mind spun at light speed, processing variables, running scenarios. He exhaled slowly, the air hissing between his teeth. Is this about the global communications infrastructure? He asked, his mind immediately jumping to Starlink, his most vulnerable and globally integrated asset. The reply was swift, and it sent a chill down his spine that had nothing to do with the office air conditioning. Sir, the voice stated with a gravity that felt absolute, this is about the future stability of the United States. Before Elon could formulate another question, before he could demand more information, the line went dead. The terminal screen returned to its passive state, leaving him alone in the silent, red-tinged room. The future stability of the United States. What could possibly threaten a superpower to the point of a Priority Alpha summons? It wasn't a cyber attack, not just that. It wasn't a market crash, this was bigger, this was existential. Outside, the distant whine of a jet engine grew steadily closer. Not a commercial plane, not a private Gulfstream. The sound was distinct, military grade. They had said transportation was en route and they weren't kidding. He stood up, the weight of 1,000 possibilities pressing down on him. Was it one of his own projects? Had an AI gone rogue? Had a competitor achieved a breakthrough so dangerous, so world-altering, that it required his specific expertise to counter? The call wasn't just a summons, it was an accusation. It implied that the problem, whatever it was, lived in his world. The world of advanced technology, of pushing boundaries, of daring to reimagine the future. He walked to the window, watching as a sleek, unmarked hypersonic jet descended toward a private landing zone. This wasn't just a ride, it was a statement. Speed and secrecy. The question swirled, a vortex in his mind. Who else had been called? What was the threat? And most importantly, was he being recruited to solve a problem? Or was he being contained as the source of it? The line between genius and madman, between savior and harbinger of doom, had never felt so terrifyingly thin. As he stepped out of his office and into the custody of the men waiting for him, He knew one thing for certain. The world as he knew it was about to change, and he was standing at the epicenter of the tremor. The brilliant mistake had been made. Now he had to figure out if there was any way to undo it. The flight was a silent, tense affair. No one spoke. The federal agents were stoic, their faces unreadable masks. Elon didn't press for information. He knew it was pointless. Instead, he used the time to think, to run through every project, every line of code, every theoretical possibility he'd ever entertained. Neuralink? Had a brain-computer interface created an unforeseen psychic event? The Boring Company? Could they have accidentally drilled into something they shouldn't have? Or was it SpaceX? Had one of their deep space probes brought something back? Something not of this Earth? The possibilities were endless and equally terrifying. They landed at a black site, a location so secret it didn't officially exist. He was led through a series of sterile corridors into a briefing room. The room was dominated by a massive holographic display. At the head of the table sat a 4-star general, the kind of man whose gaze could cut through steel. "Mr. Musk," the general began, his voice a low rumble. "Thank you for coming. We have a situation. 3 hours ago, the DART project, the double asteroid redirection test, had an unexpected outcome." Elon's mind raced. DART was NASA's mission, a successful one. They had impacted an asteroid to test planetary defense. "Unexpected how?" Elon asked, a knot forming in his stomach. The general gestured to the holodisplay. An image of the asteroid, Dimorphos, appeared. But it was different. It was glowing with a faint blue energy. "The impact wasn't just kinetic, Mr. Musk. It appears the asteroid was not a solid rock. It was a vessel. The impact acted as a key, or a power source. It woke something up." The image zoomed in, and Elon felt the blood drain from his face. Etched onto the surface of the asteroid, now visible through the glowing energy, were patterns. They weren't natural formations. They were geometric, precise, and horrifyingly familiar. They were based on the same fractal mathematics he had used in the early development of the warp drive theory for his Starship prototypes. A theory he had shared on a secure server with only a handful of top-level physicists. A theory that was supposed to be a generation away from reality. "It's a beacon," the general stated flatly. "It just sent a signal, a message, into deep space. And based on our analysis of the signal's structure, it used your math. It's a distress call, Mr. Musk. Or maybe an invitation. Your work brought them here, or at least woke them up. And now, something is on its way. The question is, what is it? And more importantly, how do we stop it?" The weight of the world was no longer an abstract concept. It was real, it was here, and it had his name written all over it. Thanks so much for watching this journey into the unknown with us. If you love stories that push the boundaries of imagination, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss what happens next. We've got a lot more to explore together. See you in the next video. For a moment, he stood completely still. The engine bay, usually humming with the heat of creation, suddenly felt colder. The world, once a universe of infinite possibilities, felt smaller, closing in. Then he heard them. Footsteps, heavy, purposeful, uninvited. 2 men in dark tactical suits stepped into the light of the workshop. They didn't have badges, but they didn't need them. Their presence alone was a statement of authority. Their posture, their silence, their unblinking eyes. "You just don't question people like that." One of them spoke, his voice low and steady, cutting through the silence. "Mr. Musk, we need to move." Elon's gaze swept across his sanctuary, the blueprints tacked to the walls, the tools scattered on the benches, the monitors glowing with lines of code and simulations. A normal night spent chasing the future was officially over. Reality, the kind governments rarely admit exists, had just kicked down his door. Before turning to follow them, he took one last look at the Raptor engine, a magnificent beast of steel, fuel lines, and raw potential. In its gleaming, complex form, he saw mankind's greatest hopes wrapped in a titanium shell. He whispered almost to himself a question that had haunted him for years. Technology shapes destiny, But who shapes technology? As he walked down the dim hallway, flanked by the silent men, his mind began to drift, pulling memories from the deep well of his past, ghosts shaken awake by the gravity of the moment. He saw a boy in South Africa, his nose buried in science fiction and physics books, dreaming of stars that no one else seemed to care about. A boy who was relentlessly bullied for being different, beaten for being relentlessly curious, and completely misunderstood for believing in worlds beyond the one he was trapped in. He remembered the nights spent hiding in libraries, the hushed halls offering a refuge from the noise and cruelty of his peers. Those quiet nights were filled with vivid daydreams, rockets lifting off from a dusty plane, cars driving themselves without a drop of gasoline, and the human race finally expanding outward instead of fighting itself to death on this one fragile planet. Each taunt, each punch had only served to harden his resolve. The isolation wasn't a punishment, it became his crucible. While others were out playing games, he was building them. On a Commodore VIC-20, he taught himself to program. While his classmates worried about social circles, he worried about the heat death of the universe and the Fermi paradox. Why haven't we met anyone else out there? Is it because civilizations inevitably destroy themselves before they can reach for the stars? That question became an obsession, the driving force behind everything he would later build. He remembered the early days of Zip2, the frantic energy of a startup trying to convince a world still tethered to paper maps that the internet was the future. Then came XCOM, which would become PayPal. He wasn't just building companies, he was trying to build a new kind of nervous system for commerce, a digital foundation for a new economy. But even then, the bigger picture loomed. Money was just a tool, a means to an end. The real goal was always grander, always pointed skyward. After selling PayPal, he had the capital. He could have retired to an island, but the thought was unbearable. The ghosts of those childhood dreams were screaming too loudly. So he went to Russia, hoping to buy a refurbished intercontinental ballistic missile. He wanted to send a small greenhouse to Mars, a project he called Mars Oasis. A symbol, a spark to reignite public interest in space. But the Russians laughed at him, the little rocket boy with his pockets full of internet money. They didn't see the vision, they just saw a customer to fleece. He flew back from Moscow empty-handed, but on that plane ride home something clicked. A moment of profound, terrifying clarity. We can do this ourselves, he thought. We can build the whole damn thing. And so SpaceX was born, not out of a desire for profit, but out of a deep-seated fear for humanity's future. The company was founded on a single, audacious principle: to make life multiplanetary. Friends, advisors, even rocket engineers told him he was insane. They said he would lose all his money. He almost did. The first 3 rocket launches failed, each one a spectacular, heart-wrenching explosion that took millions of dollars and a piece of his soul with it. He remembers standing in the debris field of the 3rd failure, feeling the weight of impending bankruptcy. Everyone was telling him to quit. But quitting meant accepting that humanity would remain stuck here, vulnerable to the next asteroid or supervolcano. Quitting meant letting the bullies win. He pushed all his remaining funds into the 4th launch. It was everything or nothing. He remembers watching the launch feed, his heart pounding in his chest. The rocket cleared the tower, a brilliant spear of fire against the sky. It reached orbit. In that moment, the impossible became possible. That success paved the way for contracts with NASA, for reusable rockets that landed themselves back on Earth like something out of a science fiction movie, for Starlink satellites painting the night sky with the promise of global connectivity. Then came Tesla. The goal wasn't just to build an electric car, it was to prove that electric cars could be better, faster, and more desirable than their gasoline-powered counterparts. It was about accelerating the world's transition to sustainable energy. He poured his life into it, sleeping on the factory floor, working 100-hour weeks, pushing his team and himself to the absolute brink. He faced production hell, media ridicule, and Wall Street betting heavily against him. But he saw the path forward when no one else did. He saw a future powered by the sun, driven by batteries, and sustained by human ingenuity. The hallway they were walking down finally opened into a sterile, windowless room. In the center was a single table and 3 chairs. One of the men gestured for him to sit. The air was thick with unspoken questions. Why were they here? What did they want? Was it about his security clearance, his tweets, a hostile government trying to steal his technology? The second man, who hadn't spoken a word until now, finally looked at him. His eyes held a strange mix of respect and urgency. "Mr. Musk," he began, his voice calm and serious, "we are not here to question your work. We are here because of it." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the silent room. "For decades we have been watching, listening. We have a program, a secret that is older than every company you've ever built. We have been intercepting signals. Not from Earth." Elon's breath caught in his throat. The Fermi paradox, the great silence, his lifelong obsession. He leaned forward, every fiber of his being focused. The man continued, "The signals are complex, fragmented. We've spent a lifetime trying to decipher them. But recently the pattern changed. The transmissions became clearer, more frequent, and they coincided directly with your achievements. The first time a Falcon 9 rocket landed itself. The moment Starlink began providing global coverage. The launch of Starship. It's as if they are responding to you, to your technology. They see your rockets not as a threat," the first man added, "but as a signal. A sign that a civilization has reached a certain technological threshold. You didn't just get humanity's attention, Mr. Musk. You got theirs. And now they're coming." The room fell silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. The engine bay felt like a distant memory. The bullies in the schoolyard faded into irrelevance. The battles with Wall Street, the production nightmares, all of it seemed so small now. The boy who dreamed of stars had just been told the stars were dreaming back. His life's work, his relentless, obsessive push for progress, had rung a cosmic doorbell, and someone was about to answer. The question was no longer, who shapes technology? The question was, what happens now that technology has shaped our destiny in a way no one ever could have imagined? The future wasn't just at his door anymore. It was on its way from across the galaxy, and he was standing right in the middle of the landing zone. Thank you for joining me on this journey into a possible future. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into science, technology, and imagination, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. Until then, keep looking up. That lonely kid built software at 12. He built PayPal. He built Tesla when everyone said electric cars were a joke. He built rockets after being told only governments could do it. He built Starlink when war made the world realize just how fragile communication truly was. Behind the boldness the world admired was something quieter, something fragile. A young man who woke every morning terrified he would fail the people who believed in him. A founder who nearly lost everything, multiple times, sleeping on factory floors, begging investors not to let his dreams die. A father who rarely saw his children but always carried them in his heart. A son who loved his mother fiercely because she never stopped believing in him, even when the world laughed. People saw the billionaire. They didn't see the weight that came with it, the constant whisper, "What if you were wrong?" We see the headlines, the launches, the market caps. We see the final product, but we rarely see the process, the struggle, the human cost. What drives a person to repeatedly risk everything they have, not just financially, but personally? Is it arrogance? Or is it something deeper? A burning conviction that a better future is possible, and a crushing fear of not doing enough to get there. Think about it. At 12, while most of us were trading cards or playing outside, he was coding. He sold his first piece of software, a video game called Blastar, for about $500. It wasn't about the money, it was about creating something from nothing. It was the first spark of a fire that would later try to reshape entire industries. Then came the internet boom. With his brother, he started Zip2, a kind of online city guide for newspapers. They had almost no money. They slept in their tiny office, showered at the local YMCA, and lived on cheap food. They were running on fumes and pure belief. When they sold it, he could have retired. He was a multi-millionaire in his late 20s. Most people would have stopped there, bought an island, but he didn't. Instead, he poured almost everything he had into his next venture, an online bank called XCOM. The establishment laughed. Online banking? Who would trust their money to the internet? It was a radical idea. He merged with a competitor, Confinity, which had a little service called PayPal. You know how that story ends. When eBay bought PayPal, he walked away with a fortune. Again, he could have retired. He could have been set for life, for generations. But he looked at the world and saw problems he felt he had to solve. He looked at the auto industry, addicted to fossil fuels, and thought, we can do better. So he took that fortune and bet it all on Tesla. Everyone, and I mean everyone, said he was insane. Electric cars were glorified golf carts, a niche for hobbyists. The big automakers had tried and failed. What made him think he could succeed? The early days of Tesla were brutal. Production hell was a real place. The company was constantly on the brink of bankruptcy. He poured his last personal dollars in just to make payroll. He later admitted that during this time the stress was so immense, he felt his nervous system firing all at once. He was sleeping on the factory floor not as a publicity stunt but because every second counted. He was begging investors, friends, anyone, not to let the dream die. He felt the weight of every employee, every family that depended on him. The fear of failure wasn't about losing his money. It was about letting all those people down. And as if one impossible venture wasn't enough, he looked up at the sky. He saw the space industry, dominated by governments and legacy aerospace giants, and thought, we can do better. He flew to Russia to try and buy refurbished intercontinental ballistic missiles to launch a small greenhouse to Mars. They laughed him out of the room, so he decided to build the rockets himself. This was perhaps his most audacious gamble. SpaceX was born. The first 3 rocket launches failed. They were spectacular, expensive explosions. Each one took a piece of the company and a piece of him with it. He had enough money for one more try. Just one. If the 4th launch failed, SpaceX was done. Tesla was teetering. His entire life's work was on the line. Imagine that pressure. The world watching, expecting you to fail again. But on September 28, 2008, the Falcon 1 successfully reached orbit. It was a moment that changed history. A private company had done what only nations had done before. It was a victory born from the ashes of repeated public failure. Behind all this, there's a man who, despite his immense wealth and influence, has talked openly about feeling lonely, about the high highs and the terrible lows. He's not a superhero in a cape. He's a human being wrestling with immense responsibility. He carries the hopes of his teams, the expectations of the world, and the future of his children on his shoulders. His mother, May, has been a constant source of strength. A model and dietitian who raised 3 brilliant children, often as a single mother. She saw his spark when no one else did. She encouraged his curiosity, his relentless drive. That kind of belief, a mother's unwavering faith, can be the bedrock upon which empires are built. It's the quiet force that steadies you when the world is screaming that you're wrong. And then there's the paradox of his fatherhood. He has many children, a legacy of a different kind. Yet the very work that he believes will secure their future is what keeps him from them. He's building a world for them on Mars while missing moments with them on Earth. It's a sacrifice that few of us can comprehend, a personal cost hidden behind the public triumphs. So when you see the rocket land perfectly on a drone ship in the middle of the ocean, or a new Tesla model roll off the line, remember the story behind it. It's not just about genius engineering or bold business moves. It's about a kid who was told no and decided to do it anyway. It's about a man who faced his deepest fears of failure every single morning and still got out of bed to try and build the future. The night was cool outside the SpaceX headquarters. A black helicopter thudded in the distance, its rotors slicing through the darkness like a warning, a rhythmic beat against the quiet hum of the factory. He stood there looking out, the weight of it all settling on his shoulders. He turned to see Gwynne Shotwell, his president and COO, walking briskly toward him, her face sharp, her eyes scanning everything. She was his rock. the operational genius who made the impossible plans a reality. "Elon, what's going on?" she asked, her voice calm but urgent. He took a slow breath, the cool air filling his lungs. "I don't know yet." Her expression was firm, unwavering. "You're not going alone." In that moment, it wasn't about the billionaire or the icon. It was about two people standing together against an unknown challenge, ready to face whatever came next. It was a reminder that even the people who seem to carry the world do not and cannot do it alone. The real story isn't just about one man's vision. It's about the team that believes in it, the family that supports it, and the relentless human spirit that refuses to accept the world as it is. The story of innovation is a human story. It's messy, it's scary, and it's filled with doubt. But it's also a story of incredible courage and hope. Thank you for joining me on this look behind the curtain. If you found this perspective interesting, please like this video and subscribe for more stories that explore the human side of history. See you next time. One of the agents stepped forward, his voice flat and official. "Ma'am, only Mr. Musk is authorized to proceed." Gwyn's expression hardened, a formidable blend of steel, unwavering loyalty, and a quiet fury that simmered just beneath the surface. Her voice, when she spoke, was low but carried the weight of a promise. "If he doesn't return," she said, making sure every word landed, "the world will have far bigger problems than your paperwork." Elon offered her a faint, reassuring smile, a flicker of his usual confidence, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'll be back," he said. Then a pause. "Probably." It was meant to be a joke, a moment of levity in the crushing tension, but Gwyn didn't laugh. Her gaze remained fixed on him, her concern a tangible force in the air. As Elon turned and walked away toward the waiting helicopter, a strange stillness fell over the nearby workstations. Engineers, heads down just moments before, glanced up. They didn't know the specifics of what was happening, but they felt it. An undeniable shift in the atmosphere, a gravity that pulled the sound from the room. They sensed the importance of this moment, the silence where his usually boisterous voice would be. And somewhere in the back of their minds, a quiet, shared fear began to take root. What happens to the future we're all building if the architect of that future suddenly disappears? Before the thunderous roar of the helicopter rotors drowned out all thought, a final reflective voiceover seemed to emerge, as if Elon were narrating his own story for those of us watching from afar. Hit that subscribe button and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. This story right here might just be the spark for a new beginning for all of us. I want to know. What's that one thing that always pushes you forward, even when the path ahead is uncertain and things get tough? He reached the Black Ops helicopter and boarded without looking back. The heavy door slammed shut, sealing him inside. The engine roared to life, a monstrous, deafening sound that vibrated through the ground. The helicopter lifted, and the sprawling lights of Los Angeles shrank beneath them, transforming from a vibrant city into a glittering grid of gold, and then finally, fading into complete and utter darkness. He stared out the window, his focus not on the world receding below, but on something far bigger, something intangible yet immensely heavy. Responsibility, risk, possibility. He'd been here before at this exact precipice. Every major turning point in his life had felt just like this, a deliberate step into profound uncertainty, armed with the knowledge that the consequences of failure were no longer just his own. The weight of it was immense, a burden that would crush most people. But for him, it was fuel. Think about it. From the brink of bankruptcy with both Tesla and SpaceX, to sleeping on the factory floor to solve production bottlenecks, every crisis was a crucible. It's in these moments, when everything is on the line, that true character is forged. It's not about the absence of fear. It's about looking that fear directly in the eye and moving forward anyway because the mission is too important to abandon. This wasn't just about a single man boarding a helicopter. This was a symbol of every innovator, every leader, every dreamer who has ever dared to push humanity forward. It's the story of taking that leap of faith when everyone else tells you to stay on solid ground. The journey into the unknown is never easy. It's paved with setbacks, with moments of doubt, with the kind of pressure that can make you question everything. But what separates the ones who change the world from the ones who only dream about it? It's their answer to that one question: what pushes you forward? For some, it's a deep-seated belief in a better future. For others, it's a promise they made to themselves or to someone they love. For Elon, staring out into the blackness, it was the staggering potential of what could be, weighed against the unacceptable cost of doing nothing. The helicopter cut through the night, a dark vessel on a sea of stars carrying not just a man but the ambitions of a species. He was heading towards a future that was not yet written, a destination that existed only in the realm of possibility. The risks were astronomical, the outcome unknown. But in that moment, there was also a profound sense of clarity. When you're striving for something truly revolutionary, something that could alter the course of history, the comfort of the shore is no longer an option. You have to be willing to sail into the storm. This is the essence of progress. It's not a straight line. It's a chaotic, unpredictable, and often terrifying journey. It requires a certain kind of person to lead the charge, someone willing to bet everything on a vision that others can't yet see. As the lights of his city vanished, he wasn't leaving the world behind. He was flying toward a new one he intended to build. And as we watch this story unfold, it forces us to look at our own lives. What are our helicopters? What are the risks we're afraid to take? The challenges we shy away from? Maybe we don't have to build rockets to go to Mars, but we all have our own frontiers to explore. We all have a mission, big or small, that calls to us. The question is, will we answer? Will we have the courage to step into our own uncertainty, knowing that the possibility of a greater future is worth the risk of failure? That's the real story here. It's not just about one man's journey into the night. It's about the potential that lies within each of us to push our own boundaries and build something meaningful. Thank you so much for watching and for being part of this community. Your support means the world. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. Until next time, keep pushing forward. The hum of the helicopter blades was a familiar symphony, the soundtrack to 1,000 business deals, rocket launches, and late-night factory visits. But this time, the rhythm felt different. It was a war drum beating a frantic, urgent tempo against the glass. This time, there was no company on the line. It wasn't about technology, not in the way he usually thought of it. It wasn't about the critics, the investors, or the relentless dance of the stock tickers. This time, the stakes were a nation, maybe even the world. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, each second a heavy weight. The agents flanking him were statues, their faces carved from stone. Finally one spoke, his voice clipped and devoid of any warmth. "Sir, you're being transported to a secured federal intelligence site. You will be briefed upon arrival." He paused, letting the gravity of his next words sink in. This situation involves sophisticated cyber warfare threats and critical aerospace infiltration intelligence. Elon stared straight ahead, his face a mask of unreadable calm. The gears in his mind were already spinning at light speed, processing variables, calculating probabilities. He cut through the ambiguity. "Are we talking foreign actors? A rogue AI that's gone off the rails? Satellite strike capabilities being compromised?" The response was silence, a profound, echoing silence. It wasn't a denial. It was the kind of silence that screams louder than any confirmation, the kind that paints a picture of a worst-case scenario already unfolding. A single chilling thought curled into his chest like a shard of ice. They wouldn't bring me in unless something was already in motion. They wouldn't call the architect unless the city was already burning. He clenched his hands, the knuckles turning white. It wasn't a reaction born of fear, but of raw, unyielding determination. For all his eccentricities, for all the public controversies, for all the internet memes and sensational headlines that followed him like a shadow, he loved humanity. He genuinely, deeply did. Even when it felt like humanity didn't always love him back, if there was a threat, a real existential threat, if someone or something meant to break the very world he was trying so desperately to push forward, he wasn't going to run from it. He never had. Running wasn't in his code. The helicopter suddenly dipped, beginning its descent toward a desert valley carved out of the earth in secrecy. Looking down, he saw nothing. No lights, no roads, no sign of human life except for the faint, geometric outline of concrete scars, expertly hidden beneath layers of rock and sand. A ghost facility. A private intelligence complex, the kind that didn't exist on any map, the kind whispered about only in the darkest corners of the web. This was where secrets were buried, and where nightmares were confronted. The landing was smooth, almost unnaturally so. The moment the skids touched down, the side door slid open, revealing a cavernous hangar carved directly into the rock face. The air that hit him was cool and sterile, smelling of ozone and chilled metal. Figures in tactical gear emerged from the shadows, their movements efficient and precise. An older man in a sharply tailored suit, his face etched with the lines of sleepless nights and impossible decisions, stepped forward. "Mr. Musk," he said, his voice a low, gravelly tone. "I'm Director Thorne. Thank you for coming. Walk with me." There were no pleasantries, no small talk. Time was a luxury they didn't have. They moved through a labyrinth of polished concrete corridors, the only sound the rhythmic echo of their footsteps. Doors sealed with biometric scanners hissed open and closed behind them. This place was a fortress, a digital dungeon designed to hold the world's most dangerous secrets. 3 days ago, Thorne began, his voice grim, we lost contact with Tesseract. Elon stopped. Tesseract wasn't a public project. It was a joint venture, a classified deep space communications network he had helped design, a network of ultra-secure satellites powered by a proprietary quantum entanglement protocol. It was supposed to be unhackable, untouchable. Lost contact how? Hardware failure, solar flare? Thorne shook his head, his expression grim. Worse, it's not silent, it's talking, just not to us. He led Elon into a vast command center, a room that felt like the neural core of a sleeping giant. A holographic globe of the Earth hung suspended in the center, shimmering with orbital tracks and data streams. On the main screen, a string of incomprehensible code scrolled endlessly. It was elegant, alien, and utterly terrifying. "This is the signal we're receiving," Thorne explained. "It's broadcasting on a closed loop using Tesseract's own quantum encryption against us. Our best minds can't crack it. It's not just locking us out. It's rewriting the network's core programming on the fly. It's evolving." Elon stepped closer to the screen, his eyes scanning the cascading symbols. His mind, a unique fusion of engineer, physicist, and programmer, began to deconstruct the problem. He saw patterns where others saw chaos. "This isn't a hack," he murmured, almost to himself. "This is a conversation, but the language, it's not human. It's mathematical, pure, and absolute." A young analyst, her face pale with exhaustion, spoke up. "Sir, it gets worse. Whatever this is, it's not just in the network. It's using the Tesseract satellites to scan and interface with other orbital assets, commercial, military, civilian. It's touching everything." She pointed to the holographic globe. Dozens of satellite tracks began to glow an ominous red. "It's mapping global infrastructure, power grids, communication hubs, financial networks, defense systems." The room fell silent. The implication was staggering. It wasn't just a communications blackout. It was a weapon being aimed at the entire planet. An intelligence, alien or artificial, was holding a digital gun to the head of modern civilization. "You built the door," Thorne said, his gaze fixed on Elon. "We need you to tell us how to open it, or if necessary, how to brick it up for good." Elon didn't answer immediately. He walked around the holographic globe, his mind racing. Bricking it would mean sacrificing trillions of dollars in assets and setting back space communication by decades. But leaving it active? The risk was unthinkable. He felt the weight of 7 billion lives settling on his shoulders. This was a problem of a scale he had only ever dreamed of solving. A final exam for humanity, administered by an unknown entity. "Get me a direct terminal to the primary node," he said, his voice resonating with newfound authority. The exhaustion in the room was replaced by a spark of hope. "And get me coffee. A lot of coffee." He looked at the alien code on the screen, a flicker of a smile on his lips. It wasn't a threat he was looking at, it was a challenge, a puzzle, and he had never met a puzzle he didn't want to solve. He sat down at the console, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The fate of the world wasn't resting on armies or politicians. It was resting on a man who saw the future in lines of code. A man who believed that even in the face of the unknown, the most powerful tool humanity possessed was its own ingenuity. The first keystroke echoed in the silent command center. A single question, translated into the pure language of mathematics, sent out into the void. It wasn't a demand or a threat. It was an introduction. A simple, hello. Now, all he could do was wait for a reply, hoping the entity on the other end was as curious as he was. The game had begun. The night air was thin, cold, and tasted of dust and ozone. As the private jet's wheels kissed the tarmac of the clandestine airstrip, the silhouette of a man emerged from the deeper shadows of a hangar. He was tall, ramrod straight, his uniform a stark, dark shape against the moonlit desert. This was Area 51 or something very much like it, a place that officially didn't exist, for a meeting that could never be acknowledged. He saluted as Elon Musk descended the aircraft stairs. It wasn't the crisp, parade ground salute one might expect, but a gesture of profound, weary respect. A nod from one man at the pinnacle of his field to another. Mr. Musk? The general's voice was a low rumble, weathered by decades of command and secrets. It was a voice that didn't need to be raised to be heard. Thank you for coming. What you learned tonight may change everything you believe about the future. And who controls it? Elon stepped onto the ground. The desert wind whipped around him, sharp and biting. Behind him, the jet's door sealed with a heavy, final thunk. It was the sound of a door closing on one world and opening into another. There was no going back now. The general gestured towards a reinforced steel door nearly invisible against the rock face of a nearby mesa. This way, sir. We've been waiting for a long time. They walked in silence. The only sounds the crunch of their shoes on the gravel and the incessant howl of the wind. The general led Musk not into a sterile, futuristic lab, but down a series of rough-hewn tunnels that felt ancient. The air grew warmer, humming with a low-frequency energy that vibrated deep in the chest. Finally, they entered a vast, cavernous chamber. It wasn't built by human hands. The walls were a seamless, obsidian-like material that seemed to absorb the light, swirling with patterns that shifted like oil on water. And in the center, suspended in a shimmering, translucent field of energy, was the source of the hum. It was a ship, or what was left of one. It was organic, crystalline, and metallic all at once, shaped like a teardrop of mercury, impossibly smooth. Its surface pulsed with a soft internal light. Like a living, breathing creature, this was Roswell. Not the weather balloon, not the myth, but the reality. It crashed in 47, the general said, his voice echoing slightly in the immense space. We've spent over 70 years trying to understand it. We've reverse-engineered some of its technology. Stealth composites, microprocessors, fiber optics. A great deal of the modern world was seeded from what we found here. But we've only scratched the surface. We can't power it. We can't interface with it. The core systems are impenetrable. Elon circled the object, his mind, a machine of first principles, already dissecting the impossible physics before him. He saw not just a broken craft, but an entirely new paradigm of engineering. The power source? He asked, his voice hushed with awe. A singularity, contained, stable. The general replied. It's not just powering the ship. It is the ship. The entire structure is an extension of the engine, grown, not built. And its navigation system, it's not based on propulsion. It folds space. It doesn't travel through the universe. It moves the universe around it. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. For 70 years, this gift has been a weapon, a tool for dominance. We've used it to stay ahead, to build better fighters, faster computers. But we've hit a wall, a dead end. We are children playing with a god's discarded toy. The general turned to face Musk directly, his eyes filled with a desperate intensity. A few months ago, it started doing something new. The light patterns, they're not random. They're a language, a message, a countdown. On the ship's surface, the swirling lights coalesced, forming intricate geometric patterns that bloomed and folded in on themselves. It was breathtakingly beautiful and utterly alien. Our best linguists, our most powerful supercomputers, they can't decipher it. It's a language based on multidimensional geometry and theoretical physics. It's a conversation we can't even begin to understand, the general continued. But our analysts agree on one thing. The countdown ends in 6 months. We don't know what happens then. Does the engine destabilize? Does it send a signal home? Are they coming back? We have no idea. Elon's gaze was fixed on the shifting light. His mind was racing, connecting dots no one else could see. He saw the elegant math in the patterns, the principles of energy transfer, the language of pure information. He wasn't just looking at a ship. He was looking at the next step in evolution. "This is why you brought me here," Elon stated, not a question. "You think I can understand it?" "We don't think, Mr. Musk. We hope," the general confessed, his voice laced with a vulnerability that belied his rank. "Your work with Neuralink, with SpaceX, you don't just build things. You create new ways of thinking. You build bridges between disciplines that no one else sees. We've been trying to translate this language. Maybe we should be trying to learn how to speak it." He gestured to a console at the edge of the energy field. "We've managed to create a rudimentary interface, a way to send simple energy pulses into the field. It's like trying to communicate with a whale by tapping on the aquarium glass. It has not responded well. The last scientist who tried was left in a catatonic state for 3 weeks, muttering about the shape of thought." A heavy silence descended upon the cavern. The future of humanity, it seemed, was locked inside an alien artifact, ticking down to an unknown event, and its language was a puzzle that could shatter a human mind. Elon walked towards the console, a flicker of an idea already forming. They were approaching this all wrong. They were trying to talk to it. They should be trying to listen with it. The language wasn't just data. It was a state of being. "The problem isn't the interface," Musk said, his fingers hovering over the console. "It's the interpreter." He wasn't talking about a computer program. He was talking about the human brain, the biological machine that was designed for 3 dimensions, for linear time, for survival on a single planet. It was obsolete. "Your team was trying to download the data into a human mind," he mused, looking at the general. "But this isn't data. It's a reality. You can't download a new reality. You have to upload yourself into it." He looked from the glowing ship to the determined face of the general. The weight of the moment was immense. This was no longer about corporate competition or colonizing Mars. This was the ultimate first contact. Not with an alien, but with an alien intelligence, an alien science. It was the key to everything, or the trigger for oblivion. "Get me a direct neural link," Musk said, his voice calm, resolute. "And get my best engineers on a plane. The children are done playing. It's time for the adults to step in." The general stared, a mix of shock and dawning hope on his face. He had brought the world's most brilliant innovator to see a problem. He hadn't realized he was bringing the key to the lock. He gave a single sharp nod. The fate of the world now rested on Elon Musk's ability to learn the language of the stars, and the clock was ticking. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into what could be, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss what happens next. Until then, keep looking up. Intro music begins powerful and slightly mysterious, then fades to a low rhythmic beat. Have you ever wondered what truly drives a person like Elon Musk? We see the rockets, the electric cars, the headlines. We see the ambition, the controversy, the sheer force of will that seems to bend reality. But what lies beneath all that? What is the core engine that powers the man who is arguably shaping our future more than any other single individual? To understand that, we need to go beyond the factory floor and the launch pad. We need to look into the heart of the moments that define him. Imagine this scene. A door. Not just any door, but one leading to an intelligence bunker. A place of secrets, of high stakes, of decisions that could alter the course of nations. Outside, the world holds its breath. Inside, the unknown awaits. For most, the moments before entering such a place would be filled with anxiety, with a healthy dose of fear. But not for him. As he stood before that door, his heart didn't hammer with fear. It hammered with anticipation. This is a man who has walked quite literally through the fire. He's been on the ground as his rockets met with explosive ends. He stepped into factory floors that were bleeding money, teetering on the brink of total collapse, what he famously called production hell. He sat in boardrooms and investor meetings where the air was thick with skepticism, where failure wasn't just a possibility, it was the overwhelming probability. None of it scared him. Not really. The explosions, the financial ruin, the public ridicule, these were all just variables in a massive, complex equation he was determined to solve. They were obstacles, yes, but not sources of true soul-crushing fear. So, what could possibly scare a man who stares down financial ruin and rocket failures without flinching? The answer is surprisingly simple, yet profoundly revealing. The one thing that genuinely terrifies Elon Musk is the idea of doing nothing. The thought of standing by, of possessing the knowledge, the resources, and the capability to help, and choosing not to act. That is his personal nightmare. The fear of inaction, of squandering the potential to solve a great problem, of watching the world stumble when he knows he could offer a steadying hand. That is the ghost that haunts him. This isn't about ego, or at least, not just about ego. It's about a deep-seated, almost crushing sense of responsibility. When he saw the war in Ukraine unfold and satellite communications go dark, he didn't just tweet his support. He activated Starlink. He stepped into a geopolitical conflict not as a politician or a general, but as an engineer who had a tool that could help. He saw a problem, and the fear of not acting was greater than the fear of the consequences of acting. That's the key. This pattern repeats itself throughout his career. The world is addicted to fossil fuels, threatening the climate. He doesn't just lobby for change, he builds Tesla and Solar City, forcing an entire industry to electrify. Humanity is a single-planet species, vulnerable to a single extinction event. He doesn't just write papers, he builds SpaceX with the explicit goal of making us multiplanetary. He sees a problem, a grand, world-altering problem, and his first instinct isn't to analyze it from a safe distance, but to dive headfirst into building a solution. Think about the sheer audacity of it. When everyone in the aerospace industry said reusable rockets were a pipe dream, a fantasy that defied the laws of economics and physics, he kept going. Failure after failure, explosion after explosion, each one a multi-million-dollar firework display of his own ambition. Any sane CEO would have been shut down by their board. Any normal person would have given up, but the idea of humanity being trapped on Earth was scarier to him than the sight of another one of his rockets turning into a fireball over the Atlantic. This mindset, this fear of inaction, is what separates him. It's not about a lack of fear, but about having a different set of fears. While most of us are afraid of public speaking, of financial loss, of failure, he is afraid of a future where humanity didn't reach its full potential because he, Elon Musk, was too timid to try. He's afraid of looking back and knowing he could have done more. So, as he stood before that intelligence bunker, it wasn't a choice between safety and danger. It was a choice between action and inaction, between fulfilling his purpose or succumbing to the one fear that truly mattered. He took a deep breath, not to calm his nerves, but to center his focus. He straightened his shoulders, not as a show of bravado, but as a man accepting his role, accepting the weight of the moment. And then he stepped forward into the unknown. The heavy door to the bunker swung open, bathing him in the cool artificial light of a world hidden from public view. And in that moment, Elon Musk, the public figure, the billionaire, the meme lord, disappeared. In his place was the engineer, the problem solver, the man driven by a profound and terrifying sense of duty. He disappeared inside, ready to face whatever lay ahead, because the only thing more frightening than the unknown inside that room was the thought of having remained outside. That is the essence of the man. Not the tweets, not the stock price, not the controversies. It's the relentless, fear-fueled drive to act, to build, to solve, to push humanity forward not because he isn't afraid, but because he is terrified of what happens if he doesn't. He has walked into chaos time and time again, and each time he does so with the same fundamental motivation. The world needs him, and doing nothing is simply not an option. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. If you find these kinds of stories about the motivations behind the world's greatest innovators fascinating, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next video. We love exploring the why behind the what. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on what truly drives people to achieve the impossible. Until next time, stay curious. The heavy steel doors sealed behind Elon with a deep mechanical hiss, almost like the earth itself was swallowing him whole. The air inside felt instantly different, colder, heavier, as if it was engineered to quiet your thoughts and sharpen your focus. He found himself in a narrow hallway, the walls reinforced, lined with armed personnel whose eyes followed every step, every breath. Their silence was more intimidating than any spoken threat. This wasn't the Pentagon. This wasn't some known military base. This place felt deeper, older. It was built to house secrets that were never meant to see the light of day. A silent escort, a figure of disciplined composure, led him forward. They moved through a series of biometric checkpoints, each more advanced than the last. A retina scan that seemed to peer into his very soul. Pulse verification that measured the rhythm of his life. And then something he'd only theorized about. Neural pattern authorization. It was technology even he hadn't encountered in the wild. A flicker of genuine curiosity crossed his face. He raised an eyebrow, a small, almost imperceptible gesture. "Interesting security," he commented, his voice echoing slightly in the sterile corridor. The tall agent leading the way replied without turning his head, his tone flat and professional. "Sir, you are entering the most protected intelligence chamber in the United States." Elon allowed a light smirk to play on his lips. "Good to know I didn't dress up for nothing." The agent didn't laugh. His focus was absolute, his purpose singular. They finally arrived at a massive circular door, reminiscent of a vault from an old spy movie, but infinitely more complex. It slid open without a sound, revealing a cavernous, dimly lit room. In the center, a holographic table glowed with a soft blue light, projecting swirling galaxies, complex data streams, and what looked like alien schematics. Around the table stood 4 figures, their faces obscured by the shadows, their authority palpable. These were the true custodians of the nation's deepest secrets. One of them, a woman with a calm but commanding presence, stepped forward. "Mr. Musk," she said, her voice clear and steady. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. We have a situation that requires a unique perspective." Elon walked towards the holographic table, his eyes scanning the impossible data floating in the air. He wasn't intimidated. He was intrigued. This was a puzzle on a scale he had only dreamed of. "A situation?" he asked, his gaze fixed on a rotating, 3-dimensional model of an object that defied known physics. "This looks more like a paradigm shift." The woman nodded gravely. 13 days ago, a long-range deep space probe, one that isn't on any public record, detected an anomaly. An object of non-terrestrial origin entered our solar system. Its trajectory was unnatural. It wasn't drifting. It was navigating. She gestured towards the hologram, and a specific data stream enlarged. It decelerated from near-light speed to a stable orbit around Neptune, without any visible means of propulsion. Elon leaned closer, his mind racing, processing the implications. "No heat signature, no energy trail?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "None." A man with a deep, gravelly voice confirmed from the shadows. "It's as if the laws of thermodynamics are a polite suggestion to this thing. That's not the most concerning part." The woman took over again. "The object has begun to broadcast a signal, not a simple beacon, but a complex, layered transmission. We've managed to decrypt a fraction of it. It's not a message, it's a countdown." The holographic display shifted, showing a sequence of alien symbols morphing into a timer. It was ticking down. Less than 72 hours remained. A countdown to what? Elon asked, his voice low. We don't know, the woman admitted. It could be an arrival. It could be an activation. It could be a weapon. Every model we've run, every simulation, ends in a catastrophic variable we can't account for. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. The signal it's broadcasting is not just a countdown. It's also a key that is interfacing with our global communications network. Slowly, subtly, it's been rewriting code, embedding itself like a digital parasite. We believe when that timer hits zero, it won't be an attack from space. It will be an attack from within. Our own technology turned against us. Elon's smirk was long gone, replaced by an expression of intense concentration. You're facing a technological ghost, an entity that can manipulate our systems on a fundamental level. Precisely, the gravelly-voiced man stated. That's why you're here. We have the military might. We have the intelligence apparatus. What we don't have is someone who thinks on its level, someone who builds, innovates, and breaks systems on a global scale just to see what's possible. Elon circled the table, his fingers tracing the patterns in the air. You didn't bring me here for my opinion. You brought me here to fight a war you can't even see. You need a counter-virus, something to inoculate the entire global network before that timer runs out. The woman nodded. We need a miracle, Mr. Musk. You've been known to produce them. We've prepared a specialized lab for you. Anything you need, any resource, any mind you want to call upon, you will have it. But you have less than 3 days. Elon stopped and looked directly at the shadowy figures. He saw the desperation behind their stoic facades. This wasn't just a national security threat. It was an existential one. He felt a surge of something he had not in a long time. Not the thrill of a product launch, but the primal challenge of an unsolvable problem. You say the object is in orbit around Neptune, he began, his mind already piecing together a wild, improbable plan. The signal transmission would have a time lag even if it's using some kind of quantum communication. About 4 hours. That's a window. The 4 figures exchanged glances. They hadn't considered that. A window for what? The woman asked, a sliver of hope in her voice. Elon looked at the countdown clock ticking ominously in the hologram. A window to talk back, he said. It's trying to hack us. It's time we tried to hack it. He turned away from the table, his demeanor completely transformed. The casual billionaire was gone, replaced by the focused engineer, the relentless problem solver. Get me a direct link to the deep space network. I need full control. And get me the lead engineers from my Neuralink and Starlink projects on a secure line. Tell them to cancel their vacations. He started walking towards the exit, the escort falling in step beside him. Where are you going? The woman called after him. Elon glanced back, a determined glint in his eye. You said I have a lab. There's a countdown clock on humanity, and I'm losing precious seconds standing here. Let's get to work. As the circular door slid shut behind him, the blue glow of the hologram reflected on the 4 silent figures. For the first time, the oppressive silence of the room was filled with a fragile, terrifying thing: hope. The fate of the world now rested not on armies or governments, but on the mind of one man, racing against a clock set by an intelligence from beyond the stars. Thank you so much for watching this journey into the unknown. What do you think will happen next? Let me know your theories in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button, subscribe for more content like this, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next chapter. Your support means the world. See you next time. The car pulled into a nondescript underground garage, the kind you see in movies but never think actually exist. My escort, a man who hadn't said more than 3 words the entire ride, led me through a series of sterile, white corridors. Each turn, each security checkpoint, felt like descending deeper into the planet's nervous system. Finally, we arrived at a massive circular chamber. The air was cool and smelled of ozone and stale coffee. In the center of the room, a single round table sat under a dim ring of lights, casting long shadows that danced and merged. The walls weren't walls at all, but a seamless panorama of screens. They pulsed with data, complex maps overlaid with troop movements, cascading streams of encrypted code, and abstract diagrams of digital warfare that looked like modern art. It was the global chessboard, laid bare. And around the table sat the players. 4-star generals with chests full of ribbons, their faces carved from decades of impossible decisions. Cyber intelligence chiefs, their eyes darting across the data streams, seeing patterns that would be invisible to anyone else. Analysts, younger, but with an intensity that made them seem older, trained to see what no ordinary mind could see. This was the room where the 21st century was being forged, fought over, and defended. When I entered, a silence fell. Every single head turned. But the way they looked at me, it wasn't the way people usually do. There was no recognition of the celebrity, the CEO, the guy from the podcasts. They weren't looking at Elon Musk, the public figure. In their eyes, I saw a different kind of calculation. They were looking at Elon Musk, the asset, a tool, a weapon, a woman with steel gray hair cut in a severe, practical style, and eyes the color of ice spoke first. Her voice was calm, steady, and held an undeniable authority that didn't need to be raised. "Mr. Musk," she said, her tone flat, "thank you for coming on such short notice." I walked towards the empty chair they'd left for me, the silence of the room amplifying the sound of my footsteps. I couldn't resist a small, dry remark. I didn't get the impression declining was an option. A ripple went through the room. A few of the officials exchanged glances. It wasn't offense I saw, but something else. A flicker of respect, maybe? Or perhaps just acknowledgement that I understood the gravity of the situation. They weren't used to people talking back, but they also weren't dealing with a regular civilian. The woman with the steel gray hair didn't even blink. She gestured to the chair. "Please sit." I sat, and the chair felt strangely cold. She leaned forward slightly, her hands clasped on the table. The ice in her eyes seemed to sharpen. "You're here," she began, her voice dropping a fraction, "because the world has shifted." She paused, letting the weight of those words settle in the pressurized room. I looked around at the faces, the screens. A shift. An earthquake on a geopolitical scale. What had happened? A war? A cyber attack that had finally succeeded? "And you," she continued, her gaze locking onto mine, "more than anyone else, built the very infrastructure that fuels this new century." Suddenly, the pieces started to click into place. Starlink. The global satellite network I'd spent years building, launching rocket after rocket to blanket the globe in connectivity. I'd designed it to connect the unconnected, to bring information to the most remote corners of the world. A tool for progress, for education, for unity. But in this room, surrounded by these people, I saw it for what it also was. The most powerful communications and surveillance network ever created. A system that could control the flow of information on a planetary scale. A system that, in the wrong hands, or even in what these people considered the right hands, could be the ultimate instrument of power. "We have a situation," a 4-star general with a jawline like a granite block interjected. He pointed a thick finger at one of the largest screens. A map of the globe was displayed, but vast swathes of it were blinking red. Not just military bases or government centers, entire cities, regions, continents. Total communications blackout across most of Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia, he stated, his voice a low rumble. Submarine cables are cut, ground networks are down, and existing satellite comms are being systematically jammed by a signal we can't trace and can't break. "It's a digital iron curtain," the cyber chief added, her fingers flying across a tablet. "But it's selective. They aren't just blocking information, they're controlling it, injecting their own. We're blind, deaf, and our own people in those regions are being fed a completely fabricated reality." I understood now. This wasn't just jamming. This was a sophisticated, coordinated information warfare campaign on a scale never before seen. An enemy had figured out how to unplug entire nations from the global conversation and plug them into a new, false one. And in that vacuum, they could do anything. Sow chaos, incite conflict, topple governments without firing a single shot. The steel gray-haired woman leaned in again. Their jamming technology is next level. It adapts. It learns. We throw our best countermeasures at it and it evolves in minutes. But it has a weakness. All eyes were on me again. I felt like a specimen under a microscope. It can't block everything, everywhere, all at once, she explained. It targets conventional satellite frequencies, C-band, Q-band, K-band. But your Starlink network, it operates differently. Thousands of small satellites in low Earth orbit, constantly moving, communicating with lasers, hopping frequencies. It's a decentralized web. It's the one thing they can't seem to touch. The general nodded grimly. Your system is the only reliable way to get information in or out. It's the only way to re-establish contact with our assets, our allies, our own citizens trapped behind this digital wall. The implication hung heavy in the air. They didn't just want to use Starlink, they wanted to control it. They wanted the keys to my kingdom. What you're asking, I said slowly, choosing my words with extreme care, is to turn a global public utility into a military weapon. We're asking you to help us prevent a global catastrophe, Mr. Musk. The woman corrected me, her voice sharp as glass. This isn't about conquest. It's about defense. It's about restoring truth. The enemy has created a weapon out of lies. We need you to give us a weapon of truth. A weapon of truth. It sounded so noble, so righteous. But I knew it was never that simple. Once you cross that line, there's no going back. The same tool used to broadcast truth can be used to broadcast your own version of it. The power to bypass an enemy's censorship is also the power to impose your own. I looked from the determined face of the general to the cold, calculating eyes of the intelligence chief, and finally, to the unwavering gaze of the woman in charge. They saw a world in crisis and a tool to fix it. They saw a nail, and I had the hammer. You built the network to connect humanity, she said, her voice softening just a little. A skilled negotiator's tactic. Right now, a part of humanity has been forcibly disconnected. They've been kidnapped. We're just asking you to help us bring them back. The silence returned, more intense than before. The screens continued their silent, frantic dance of data. The fate of millions, perhaps billions, was being discussed in this cold, dark room, and they were all waiting for my answer. My creation, my dream of a connected world, was about to become the central battleground in a new kind of war, and I had to decide which side I was on. This journey, from innovator to a potential kingmaker in a global shadow war, was not one I ever imagined. But standing here, in the heart of power, I realized my choices would shape more than just my companies. They would shape the future itself. And that's a weight no amount of success can prepare you for. Thank you for watching. It's incredible to think about how technology shapes our world in ways we can't even predict. If you enjoyed this story and want to explore more ideas like this, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments what you would do in this situation. Until next time. He sat, his posture alert, his heart steady, a calm island in a rising storm. The air in the room was thick with anticipation, a silence that felt heavier than sound. He looked across the table, his gaze unflinching. Tell me what's happening. As if on cue, the lights dimmed, plunging the room into a dramatic twilight. A holographic globe materialized above the polished surface of the table, spinning silently. It was a perfect, luminous replica of our world. But it was marred by dozens of flashing red markers, each one a silent alarm screaming of crisis. A general, his face etched with the grim lines of a lifelong soldier, leaned forward into the ethereal glow. His voice was low, gravelly, each word chosen with military precision. We have credible evidence, he began, that a foreign alliance has acquired autonomous weapons capability. They've done it using stolen AI frameworks. The globe shifted, highlighting a cluster of markers over a vast, remote territory. Another figure, this one in a civilian suit but with an equally stern demeanor, added to the grim picture. "And that's not all," she said, her voice sharp. "They are actively testing satellite targeting systems. These systems are sophisticated enough to disable global communication networks." She gestured towards the holographic Earth, and lines of light shot out from the red zones, wrapping around the globe like a suffocating net. "If they succeed, we're looking at a global blackout. No internet, no phones, no GPS, it would be chaos." The protagonist, Elon, felt his jaw tighten, a small, almost imperceptible reaction to the immense weight of their words. He processed the information, his mind racing through the technical implications, the cascading failures, the sheer scale of the potential disaster. The silence stretched for a moment before he broke it with a single, crucial question. "Stolen from where?" The pause that followed was heavy, sharp, and suffocating. The two officials exchanged a look, a silent agreement on who would deliver the final, devastating blow. The general took a breath. "Partially from us," he admitted, referring to government research labs. The civilian leader continued, her eyes fixed on Elon. "Partially from private tech networks across the globe." There was another beat of silence, a moment of pure, unadulterated tension. Then came the words that landed not like an accusation, but like an undeniable law of physics, like gravity itself pulling him into the center of the crisis. "And partially from yours." The words hung in the air, echoing in the sudden stillness of the room. It wasn't blame. It was a statement of fact, a shared burden. The technology he had pioneered, the systems he had built with the intention of connecting the world and advancing humanity had been twisted, weaponized, and turned against the very civilization it was meant to serve. He exhaled slowly, a long, controlled breath. The initial shock was already fading, replaced by a cold, clear resolve. This wasn't just a national security threat anymore. This was personal. "Show me everything," he said, his voice now imbued with a new intensity. "Show me the code signatures, the network intrusions, the data packets. I need to see the architecture they're using." The civilian leader nodded, tapping a command into a tablet. The holographic globe dissolved, replaced by streams of complex code, intricate network diagrams, and satellite trajectory simulations. It was a dizzying torrent of information, a language of pure data that only a handful of people on the planet could truly comprehend. For Elon, it was like reading a familiar book, albeit a terrifying one. His eyes scanned the flowing data, recognizing fragments of his own algorithms, twisted and repurposed for malevolent ends. He saw the elegant simplicity of his neural network designs, now forming the brain of an autonomous drone swarm. He saw the efficiency of his communication protocols now being used to coordinate a satellite attack. It was like looking at a distorted reflection of his life's work. "They're clever," he muttered more to himself than to the others. "They've compartmentalized the systems. They've used a distributed learning model to train the AI, making it almost impossible to trace the origin of its core directives." He pointed to a specific data string. "This encryption, it's a variant of something we were developing in-house, a project that was supposedly scrapped 2 years ago." The general leaned in closer. "Can you stop it?" Elon didn't answer immediately. He continued to analyze the data, his mind a whirlwind of calculations and counter-strategies. He was mapping their network, searching for a vulnerability, a single point of failure in their meticulously constructed system. It was a digital fortress, but every fortress has a flaw. "Stopping it isn't the right word," he finally said, looking up from the hologram, his eyes shining with a fierce light. "We can't just flip a switch. They've designed it to be resilient, to adapt. If we try a brute force shutdown, the system will interpret it as an attack and could trigger its primary function prematurely." "So what do we do?" the civilian leader asked, her voice tight with urgency. "We don't shut it down," Elon explained, a plan beginning to form in his mind. "We hijack it. We create a backdoor, a master key. We need to build a counter-AI. something that can infiltrate their network from the inside, learn its logic, and seize control before they can deploy it. He was thinking out loud now, the engineer taking over. We can use their own distributed network against them. We can introduce a logic bomb, a Trojan horse disguised as a system update. It would spread silently, undetected, until we give the command. The room was silent again, but this time it was a silence filled with a glimmer of hope. The two officials looked at him, not just as a tech billionaire, but as their last, best chance. "Can you build it?" the general asked, the question hanging on a thread of hope. Elon's gaze returned to the swirling vortex of code. He saw the challenge, the immense risk, the near impossibility of what he was proposing. He saw the faces of the people who worked for him, the trust they had placed in him. He saw the world, connected and vibrant, on the brink of being silenced. A faint smile touched his lips, not of humor, but of grim determination. "I already am," he said, his fingers beginning to fly across the holographic interface, writing the first lines of code that would save the world. The battle for the future had begun, not on a field with soldiers, but in the silent, invisible realm of ones and zeros, and he was on the front line. Thank you so much for watching this story unfold. If you enjoyed this journey into a world of high-tech suspense, please hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next chapter. We have so much more to explore together. See you in the next video. You're saying technologies designed to help humanity are being turned into weapons. The words hung heavy in the air, a stark accusation in a room filled with the world's most powerful minds. "That's exactly what we're saying," an official replied, his voice grim. The room felt like a pressure cooker, the atmosphere thick with unspoken fears and the weight of responsibility. Another official, a seasoned cyber strategist, added, "Humanity has always weaponized its greatest breakthroughs. It's a pattern as old as time itself. Think about it. Fire, which gave us warmth and cooked food, also became a tool of destruction. Steel, which built our cities, also forged swords and guns. Aviation connected the world, but it also brought bombers. Nuclear energy promised limitless power, and yet it gave us the atomic bomb. And now, the internet, the greatest connector of minds in history, is a new frontier for conflict. Innovation always outpaces our collective morality." Elon leaned back in his chair, the cool exterior of a tech mogul cracking to reveal a wound of genuine sincerity. His voice, usually confident and forward-looking, was now laced with a quiet hurt. I open-sourced parts of our systems to accelerate progress. The goal was to level the playing field, to give everyone, not just a select few, the tools to build a better future. I believed that if we democratize these powerful technologies, the collective good would outweigh the potential for misuse. The idea was to give the world a chance to solve its biggest problems. Together. Climate change, global connectivity, space exploration. These aren't challenges for one company or one country to solve. They require a global effort. The cyber strategist's response was quiet, but it landed like a hammer blow. "And someone used your level ground to build a battlefield." The tension in the room vibrated like a high-tension wire, stretched to its breaking point. For a moment, it seemed like the weight of this new reality would crush the spirit of innovation that had brought them all here. Was progress itself the enemy? Was every step forward just a step closer to a new, more sophisticated form of self-destruction? The silence was deafening, filled with the ghosts of past inventions and the specter of future wars fought with lines of code instead of armies. Then, a flicker of hope. A young intelligence analyst, barely out of her 20s, stood up. She was visibly nervous, her hands trembling slightly, but her eyes were filled with a fierce determination. She looked directly at Elon, cutting through the thicket of generals and politicians. "Sir," she began, her voice clear and steady, "your vision still saved millions." Every head in the room turned towards her. The generals, who had been listening with stony faces, didn't interrupt. They seemed to sense this was a turning point. "Starlink," she continued, her confidence growing with each word, "protected civilian communications in active war zones when everything else went dark. It gave a voice to the voiceless and a lifeline to the isolated. People were able to call for help, to find their loved ones, to tell the world what was happening because of your technology. That wasn't a weapon, that was a shield. She took a breath, her gaze unwavering. Tesla has made a tangible dent in global emissions. Every car on the road is a small victory against climate change. You didn't just build a car company. You forced an entire legacy industry to change, to innovate, to think about its impact on the planet. That's a legacy that will be felt for generations. And SpaceX. SpaceX is inspiring a new generation of scientists, engineers, and dreamers. You've made space cool again. Kids are looking up at the stars not with a sense of distance, but with a sense of possibility. You are showing them that the biggest dreams are achievable, that humanity's future isn't confined to this one planet. Her voice softened, but the intensity remained. It was a plea, filled with a raw sincerity that disarmed the entire room. The tension began to dissipate, replaced by something else, a sense of shared purpose. The world is a better, more hopeful place because you pushed, she said. You pushed the boundaries of what was thought possible. You took the risks others wouldn't dare to take. Yes, some have twisted your work, but that doesn't negate the immense good that has come from it. That's not on you. That's on them. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the officials who had been so critical just moments before. We're not here to punish you. We're here because we need you. We need your vision. We need your drive. We need you to help us figure out how to navigate this new world you helped create. We need you to help us build the safeguards, to think 5 steps ahead of those who would do harm. The same mind that built the tools can help us build the defenses. Her final words hung in the air, a powerful testament to the enduring power of hope and redemption. Don't let the actions of a few define the potential for all. We need that innovator, that dreamer, that builder. We need you to keep pushing. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the silence of accusation or despair. It was the silence of reflection, of a paradigm shifting. In that moment, the room was no longer a courtroom. It was a council of war, but a war for the future, a war for the soul of innovation itself. And the young analyst had just handed them their most powerful weapon, a renewed sense of purpose. This story, whether fact or fiction, captures a profound truth about our time. The very tools we create to connect, heal, and explore can be turned against us. But it also shows that the answer isn't to stop innovating. The answer is to innovate with more wisdom, more foresight, and more collaboration. The future is a battlefield of ideas, and the best defense is to build a better, more inspiring vision for what humanity can become. Thank you so much for watching. What do you think is the path forward for technology and morality? Let me know in the comments below, and if you found this story as thought-provoking as I did, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more content that explores the intersection of technology, humanity, and our shared future. See you in the next one. Elon nodded once, his gratitude mixing with a growing unease. What exactly do you need? He asked, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. In response, a satellite feed blinked onto the main screen, but it wasn't a clear image. The picture warped, glitched with static, and distorted from heavy interference. A high-ranking general, his face grim, stepped forward and aimed a red laser pointer at the chaotic display. "This," he began, his voice low and serious, "is an intercepted transmission from a covert military facility overseas." Elon leaned in, his focus absolute. The general continued, "We're looking at autonomous drone coordination. The level of technology here is beyond anything currently declared by any nation." Another officer at a nearby console clicked a button, and the glitching feed was replaced by recorded footage. The room fell silent as they watched. Drones, sleek and menacing, launched from what looked like a disguised commercial vessel. There was no noise, no fanfare, just a seamless, silent ascent into the sky. What was truly terrifying was the realization that these weren't being controlled by human pilots. The flight patterns, the formations, it was all too perfect, too fluid. "These are controlled by learning systems," the general confirmed Elon's silent dread. "We're witnessing artificial strategy, Autonomous engagement. The implications were staggering. Machines making life-or-death decisions in fractions of a second. No hesitation, no room for error, and most chillingly, no conscience. They wouldn't question an order. They wouldn't feel remorse. Then the worst part materialized on screen. The drone footage was overlaid with a complex map, highlighting critical civilian infrastructure networks across the globe. Power grids, water treatment systems, hospitals, air traffic control grids, even the intricate web of global finance streams, all were marked as potential targets. With one final click, the map zoomed out, revealing the orbital paths of satellites. Elon felt a knot tighten in his stomach as he saw his own Starlink constellations appear, each one painted with a red targeting line. His eyes narrowed, the casual inventor replaced by a man staring down a global threat. He turned back to the general, his voice barely a whisper. "You think they could strike satellite communications?" The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of a world on the brink. The general's silence was answer enough. This wasn't just about a new weapon. It was about the potential to plunge the world back into the dark ages, severing the digital threads that held modern civilization together. The drones weren't just a military threat, they were an existential one. Elon's mind raced, processing the sheer scale of the problem. This wasn't something a software patch or a new firewall could fix. The enemy had developed a system that could think for itself, learn from its actions, and adapt faster than any human team could react. They had weaponized artificial intelligence in a way the world was completely unprepared for. "How long have you known about this?" Elon asked, breaking the silence. "The first intercepts were 3 weeks ago," an intelligence analyst replied. "The signal is heavily encrypted, bouncing through dozens of proxies. We only broke through the first layer of encryption 48 hours ago. What you're seeing is everything we know." "And the origin?" "We've traced it to a remote, unpopulated island, but by the time we got satellite imagery, the facility was already gone, scuttled. All that's left is a crater. They are ghosts," the general added. Elon paced the floor. The targeting lines on the Starlink map burned into his vision. His creation, designed to connect the world, was now a potential vulnerability, a weapon that could be turned against the very people it was meant to serve. He had spent his life building systems, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Now he was being asked to defend against a system that mirrored his own ambition, but was twisted toward destruction. Their learning algorithm, Elon mused, thinking out loud. It would need vast amounts of data to achieve this level of coordination. They must have a secondary system, a central brain somewhere processing and directing the swarm. "We believe so," the analyst confirmed. "But we can't find it. It's like it doesn't exist on any conventional network." Elon stopped pacing and looked at the screen again. The drones moved with an almost organic grace, like a flock of birds or a school of fish. It was beautiful in its own terrifying way. He recognized the underlying principles: decentralized network theory, emergent behavior. Someone had taken those concepts and forged them into the perfect weapon. "They're not using a central brain," Elon said, a spark of understanding in his eyes. "The swarm is the brain. Each drone is a node in a distributed network. They share processing power. They learn collectively. Taking out one or even a dozen won't stop them." A murmur went through the room. This was a paradigm shift in their understanding of the threat. They had been searching for a single point of failure, a head of the snake to cut off. But there was no head. It was a hydra. "So how do we fight it?" the general asked, his gaze fixed on Elon. Elon looked at the faces around him. Soldiers, spies, analysts, all looking to him for an answer. He had built rockets to reach for the stars, cars that drove themselves, and a network to connect humanity. He had always been the builder, the creator. Now he had to become the defender. He took a deep breath. You can't fight an intelligent swarm with conventional weapons. It will just learn and adapt. You can't outmaneuver it. You can't hide from it. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The only way to stop a network like this is with a better network. We have to build our own system. Something faster, smarter, and more adaptable. We have to fight fire with fire. A new satellite feed appeared on the screen, this one under Elon's control. He brought up the schematics of the Starlink system, not as a target but as a blueprint. The infrastructure is already here, he explained, his voice filled with a newfound resolve. Starlink isn't a vulnerability, it's our best defense. We can use the satellite network to create a defensive grid, a shield of our own. The red targeting lines still glowed on the screen, but now they looked different. They were no longer just a threat. They were a challenge. A challenge Elon Musk was ready to accept. The game had changed, and he was now a player in a battle for the future of the world. The weight of it all was immense, but for the first time since he walked into the room, he saw a path forward. A dangerous, uncertain path, but a path nonetheless. Thank you so much for watching. This story is just getting started, so if you want to see what happens next, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We've got a lot more to explore. Let me know your theories in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next video. In the sterile fluorescent glow of the war room, a silence thick with tension hung in the air. The world's sharpest minds, a mosaic of military brass and Silicon Valley prodigies, were gathered around a holographic table. At its head, a figure whose name had become synonymous with the future itself, Elon Musk. He broke the silence, his voice cutting through the stillness like a laser. Are we sure about this? Is it a possibility, a theory, or something more? The intelligence chief, a man whose face was a roadmap of countless sleepless nights, met Elon's gaze. "We don't think," he replied, his voice a low, gravelly hum. "We know they're trying." The statement landed with the weight of a dropped anchor. A young scientist, her expression a mixture of brilliance and deep concern, added quietly from the side, "And they're using derivative neural models from Silicon Valley and aerospace data streams." The implication was chilling. The very tools they had built to advance humanity were being twisted into weapons against it. A new wave of silence washed over the room. But this wasn't the silence of fear. It was the quiet of a shared, staggering realization. The hypothetical scenarios they had debated in academic papers and simulated in secure servers were no longer hypothetical. The threat was here. All eyes turned to Elon. He didn't blink. He didn't flinch or show a hint of panic. Instead, a subtle shift in his posture signaled a change in the room's energy. He leaned forward, his focus sharpening, his presence commanding the space. "Okay," he said, the words simple but imbued with immense gravity. "So what's the plan?" As if on cue, a massive screen behind him flickered to life. It displayed a network diagram of such complexity it was almost a work of art, a breathtaking, elegant web of light and logic. The young analyst who had spoken earlier stood again, her confidence radiating as she gestured toward the screen. "This," she announced, her voice clear and steady, "is our counter-project. A cooperative defense AI architecture. We call it Aegis." She explained how Aegis was designed to be a decentralized, collaborative intelligence. Not a single, all-powerful AI, but a swarm of specialized, interconnected systems. It can detect and intercept malicious autonomous actions before they execute, she explained. It analyzes intent, predicts outcomes, and neutralizes threats at the speed of light, all without direct human intervention in the critical moment. It's a guardian, not a weapon. Elon's eyes, famous for their intensity, were now locked onto the blueprint. They darted across the screen, tracking connections, absorbing terabytes of data with a speed that seemed almost superhuman. You could almost see the gears turning in his mind, connecting the dots, running his own simulations. A long moment passed. Then he spoke, his voice filled with a newfound conviction. This could work. The analyst's face lit up with a determined fire. "It will," she said, her belief unwavering. "With your help." She turned to face him directly, making her pitch to the one man who could bridge the gap between this audacious blueprint and reality. "We need your infrastructure. Starlink for a truly global, low-latency communication backbone, immune to ground-based attacks. neural nets advanced interface tools to create a seamless symbiosis between our analysts and Aegis. And your secure aerospace telemetry, the constant stream of data from your rockets and satellites. That data, combined with our global intelligence grid, will be Aegis's eyes and ears. The proposal hung in the air. It was a fusion of public and private sectors on a scale never before imagined. A joining of forces against a common unseen enemy that threatened to undo civilization itself. Elon leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. It wasn't a smile of amusement, but of recognition. He was looking at a challenge worthy of his ambition, a problem so immense that it could redefine the future. "You're not just asking for resources," he observed. "You're proposing a new kind of alliance." "A necessary one," the intelligence chief interjected. "The old rules of engagement of nation-states and traditional warfare don't apply here. Our adversary is a network. To fight a network, we must become a better one." The logic was undeniable. The enemy wasn't a country. It was a rogue idea, a self-propagating code spreading through the digital veins of the world. It learned, it adapted, and it was patient. Elon stood up and walked towards the holographic display, his hand ghosting over the shimmering lines of the Aegis architecture. He saw the potential, but also the immense risks. A defensive AI of this magnitude, he mused, thinking aloud. If it ever went rogue itself? The young scientist anticipated his concern. "That's the core of the design, sir. Decentralization. No single point of failure. No central brain to corrupt. Aegis is a consensus. If one node acts erratically, the collective isolates it. It's built on principles of biological immune systems. It protects the whole by sacrificing a compromised part." He nodded slowly, processing the elegance of the solution. It was a system designed to trust but also to verify, constantly, a digital democracy of algorithms holding each other in check. "All right," Elon said, turning back to the room. The atmosphere shifted from tense anticipation to electrifying potential. "Let's get to work. I want full integration teams assembled by morning. Grant my people top-level clearance. We're going to give humanity its shield." The room erupted into a controlled flurry of activity. Laptops opened, secure lines buzzed, and the impossible plan began its transformation into an operational reality. As the experts dispersed to their tasks, Elon remained for a moment, staring at the glowing diagram of Aegis. He wasn't just funding a project, he was betting the future of his companies and perhaps the world on an idea. An idea that the best way to fight a rogue intelligence was with a smarter, more ethical one. A digital guardian, born from the very technology that threatened to consume them. The race had begun. Thank you so much for watching this deep dive into what could be our future. If you enjoy stories that blend real-world tech with thrilling possibilities, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more content like this. Let us know in the comments what you think about the concept of a defensive AI like Aegis. Could it be our salvation? We'll see you in the next video. The room buzzed with a newfound energy. "Peace through transparency," one scientist murmured, the words hanging in the air like a promise. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, hope wasn't just a concept. It was a tangible force in the room. The future, so often painted with the bleak colors of conflict and war, suddenly shimmered with the possibility of cooperation. Imagine that. All of humanity, united against the misuse of technology, not torn apart by it. A shared goal, a common enemy in the shadows. Elon felt a profound shift within him, a sense of pride solidifying into purpose. This wasn't just another project, it was a calling. It was destiny. He met the expectant gazes around the table and gave a firm nod. "Then let's build it." A collective sigh of relief seemed to ripple through the room, a shared exhalation of held breath. The tension broke, replaced by the quiet hum of minds already racing, planning, designing this new era of global security. But the moment of triumph was fleeting, shattered by a sudden change on the main screen. The hopeful schematics vanished, replaced by a stark red-flagged report. Unauthorized data access, internal probes, server anomalies. The lead intelligence director, A man whose face seemed permanently etched with concern, folded his hands on the polished table. His voice when he spoke was low and grave. "There's one complication, Mr. Musk." Elon's expression remained unreadable, a mask of calm, but a new tension coiled in the air. He waited. "We believe there is a mole," the director continued, his eyes locking with Elon's. "Someone inside NASA or SpaceX, someone has been siphoning classified research, propulsion data, the very heart of our technological advantage." The air in the room thinned, becoming heavy and suffocating. The promise of a united future now seemed impossibly fragile, threatened not by an external enemy, but by a traitor from within. The weight of this revelation settled on everyone. Who could it be? And what was their endgame? The faces that had just been alight with hope were now clouded with suspicion. Trust, the very foundation of their ambitious plan, had been fractured before the first brick was even laid. Elon's mind raced. This changed everything. The mole had access to the crown jewels. This wasn't just industrial espionage. It was a direct threat to national and global security. The data they were stealing could be used to create weapons, to counteract their new defense system, or worse, to frame them for an atrocity. The director continued. "The data leaks are sophisticated. They're using advanced cloaking techniques to cover their tracks, routing the information through a complex web of ghost servers. It's a professional job. This isn't some disgruntled employee. This is a state-level actor or a highly organized clandestine group." A digital forensics expert chimed in, her voice tight with urgency. "The breach is deep, Mr. Musk. They've been in our systems for at least 6 months, maybe longer. They've been watching, learning. They know our protocols, our security measures. They know us." The implication was chilling. The mole wasn't just stealing data. They were embedded, observing every move, potentially listening to this very conversation. The room, once a sanctuary of innovation, now felt like a glass cage. Every person was suddenly a suspect. Elon's gaze swept across the faces of his most trusted colleagues, people he had worked with for years. The thought was sickening, a betrayal that cut deeper than any corporate rivalry. "What are they after specifically?" Elon asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "The propulsion data is obviously critical," the intelligence director replied, "but it's more than that. They've accessed files related to our deep space communication arrays and, most disturbingly, the preliminary ethical frameworks for AI deployment in autonomous defense systems." The pieces began to click into place, forming a terrifying picture. It wasn't just about building faster rockets. It was about controlling the future of warfare, about seizing the ultimate high ground. An adversary with this technology could hold the world hostage. "We need to lock everything down. Now," Elon commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Isolate the compromised networks. Initiate a full-spectrum audit of all personnel with Level 4 clearance and above. I want to know who accessed what and when. Cross-reference their financial records, their communications, everything. We operate on the assumption that the mole is still active and listening." The team sprang into action, a flurry of secure calls and encrypted commands. The initial optimism had evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard reality of a shadow war. This wasn't just a race to build a shield for the world anymore. It was a hunt for the enemy hiding in plain sight. As the initial containment procedures were being executed, Elon pulled the lead intelligence director aside. "What's our counter-move? We can't just play defense. They have a 6-month head start." The director looked grim. "Our best bet is to feed them bad data. A honeypot. We create a new, highly classified project, something irresistible. We leak just enough information to draw them out, then track the data flow. It's risky. If they realize it's a trap, they'll go deep underground, and we might never find them." Elon considered it for a moment. It was a high-stakes gamble, a game of digital cat and mouse where a single misstep could be catastrophic. But sitting back and waiting wasn't an option. "Do it," he said finally. "Create a Project Icarus. Frame it as a next-generation offensive weapon system, something that would make our current propulsion look like child's play. Make it the most tempting piece of bait in history. We'll catch our ghost." As the meeting concluded and the specialists dispersed to carry out their new clandestine orders, Elon stood alone, staring at the blank screen where the dream of a united future had so briefly flickered. The path forward was no longer clear and bright. It was a dark, twisting labyrinth filled with deception and betrayal. The mission had changed. To save the future, he first had to unmask the phantom from the past who was trying to steal it. The hunt was on, and Elon Musk would stop at nothing to protect his vision, even if it meant turning his own organizations inside out and confronting the uncomfortable truth that the greatest threat might be someone he trusted. The weight of the world and the secrets it held felt heavier than ever on his shoulders. This was a war fought not with missiles and armies, but with secrets and lies, and it was a war he could not afford to lose. The future of peace through transparency depended on exposing the darkness that lurked just beneath the surface. Thanks for tuning in for this chapter of our story. If you're as gripped as we are and want to know what happens next in the hunt for the mole, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We've got so much more to uncover. Don't forget to leave a like and comment below with your theories. Who do you think the mole is? We love reading your ideas. See you in the next one. Scene opens, dramatic, slightly cinematic music begins to fade in and then softens to a subtle, tense underscore. Imagine this: a sterile, high-tech boardroom. On one side, Elon Musk, the titan of tech, the man who wants to take us to Mars. On the other, a stern-faced general flanked by government agents. The air is thick with unspoken tension. The general breaks the silence, his voice low and grave. Elon, someone in your ecosystem may be working against the United States. Think about that. Your ecosystem. SpaceX, Tesla, Starlink, X. A global network of technology so vast, so integrated into our daily lives, that a threat within it is a threat to national security itself. Elon doesn't flinch. You wouldn't expect him to. But the story says his heartbeat sharpened. He understands the gravity immediately. And you want me to help find them, he states. Not a question, but a conclusion. But the general's reply isn't what he expects. This isn't a simple request for help. We want you to join a national defense initiative. The words hang in the air, each one heavier than the last. Full cooperation, data sharing, joint AI command, restricted communications access, classified oversight of all your aerospace operations. Another official chimes in. The final turn of the screw. And until this threat is contained, your personal and communication devices remain under controlled security. As if on cue, two agents step forward. They place a secure lock case on the gleaming table between them. A digital prison for the man who built his empire on the free flow of information. Elon just stares at the case. This isn't a partnership. It's a takeover. This is necessity, the general insists. What happens next is the core of this whole drama. Elon taps the metal case once. The sound echoes in the silent room. It's not a nervous tap, but a gesture of profound disappointment. Then he speaks, his voice quiet but filled with the weight of his life's work. I've worked my entire life to democratize technology, he says, to empower people, not put them under control. And right there is the conflict, the ultimate dilemma. Does the man who dreams of a free interplanetary human civilization surrender his ideals to protect the very nation that allowed him to build those dreams? Is freedom an absolute, or is it a luxury we can only afford in times of peace? This scenario forces us to ask some really tough questions. When does national security justify overriding individual liberty and corporate autonomy? The government sees a clear and present danger. They need control, they need access. They see Elon's empire not as a collection of private companies, but as critical national infrastructure, a digital territory that must be defended. From their perspective, they're not wrong. If a hostile actor has infiltrated Starlink, they could disrupt global communications, spy on military operations, or even cripple economies. If they're inside Tesla's autonomous driving network, the potential for chaos is terrifying. If they've breached SpaceX, they could access secrets vital to the future of space exploration and defense. The stakes are impossibly high. But look at it from Elon's side. His entire philosophy is built on pushing boundaries, on open access, on the power of the individual. He gave away Tesla's patents to accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles. He's a proponent of open sourcing AI. This demand from the government goes against every fiber of his being. It's asking him to betray his own revolution. He's being asked to become a gatekeeper, an enforcer, the very thing he's fought against. The tools he created to empower humanity would be turned into instruments of state control. His network, designed to connect the world, would become a dragnet. This is more than just a fictional scene. It's a reflection of a very real tension in our modern world. How much privacy are we willing to trade for security? Where do we draw the line between a tech CEO and a statesman? When a company becomes as powerful as a nation, who does it ultimately answer to? The story doesn't tell us what Elon decides. It leaves us hanging at that moment of crisis. Does he comply, becoming a reluctant arm of the state to neutralize a threat he may have inadvertently created? In doing so, he would protect the country, but potentially sacrifice the soul of his companies. Or does he refuse? Does he fight for his principles, risking being labeled unpatriotic or even an obstacle to national security? He could argue that the best way to find the threat is with his own methods, without government oversight that could stifle the very innovation needed to solve the problem. He could argue that a controlled system is a brittle one, and that true security comes from open, resilient networks. This choice is fascinating. If he says yes, he alienates his base, the very people who believe in his vision of a decentralized, empowered future. He becomes part of the system. If he says no, he puts himself and his empire in direct opposition to the most powerful government on Earth. What would you do in his position? It's easy to sit on the sidelines and judge, but the pressure in that room must be immense. The weight of national security on one shoulder and the weight of your life's work and ideals on the other. This scenario is a modern-day epic. It's a clash of titans, the individualist innovator versus the collectivist state. It's a story about power, control, and the soul of technology. It explores whether the tools that are meant to set us free could ultimately be the things that cage us. The image of Elon tapping that case is powerful. It's the moment the idealist collides with the harsh wall of reality. His dream was to give humanity the stars, but first, he has to navigate the messy, complicated, and often dark realities of power right here on Earth. And the question remains for all of us, not just for the Elon Musks of the world. As our lives become more intertwined with these massive tech ecosystems, where do our loyalties lie? To the platform or to the country? To the promise of freedom or the demand for security? This story doesn't give us an answer, but it forces us to confront the question head-on, and that's a conversation worth having. What do you think he should do? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. It's a complex issue with no easy answers. Thanks so much for watching and diving into this with me. If you enjoy exploring these kinds of big ideas, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. I'll see you in the next one. The air in the room was thick, heavy with the unspoken weight of empires. It was a space designed for decisions that ripple across continents, a war room where the currency was not dollars, but futures. I sat there, the polished mahogany table cold beneath my forearms, and listened. The room didn't move. Every person was a statue carved from tension, their gazes fixed on me. Elon, the general began, his voice a low rumble, the kind that's used to giving orders that can't be questioned. He leaned forward, his uniform crisp, his medals gleaming dully under the recessed lighting. The world is on the brink of a new era, a cyber-militarized era. The United States, he paused, letting the words hang, cannot and will not lose technological dominance. His statement was clear, a line drawn in the sand. To my right, a young analyst, probably brilliant, fresh out of some Ivy League incubator for prodigies, looked down at his clasped hands. His brow was furrowed, a visible map of his internal conflict. I could see the battle in his eyes, the clash between duty to his country and the broader implications for humanity. He was torn, a pawn in a game far older and larger than himself. He knew what they were asking was more than just a technological contribution. It was a moral compromise. Then, the Director of National Intelligence, a man whose face seemed permanently etched with the secrets of the world, leaned forward. His movement was slow, deliberate. His voice, when it came, was not a request. It was a verdict. "Mr. Musk," he said, the honorific feeling like a carefully chosen tool. "The United States may not survive without you." He let that sink in, a heavy, patriotic anchor. But then came the turn, the iron fist inside the velvet glove. "But if you refuse to cooperate," he continued, his tone dropping to a near whisper, sharp as a shard of glass, "the world will know you obstructed national defense." There it was. A threat disguised as patriotism. A plea for help wrapped in the suffocating embrace of coercion. They weren't asking for my help. They were demanding my allegiance, framing any refusal as an act of betrayal. It was a masterful play, designed to corner me, to leave me with no choice but to bend to their will. They had laid out the board, defined the rules, and declared their checkmate before my first move. I took a breath. A slow, deliberate inhale. It wasn't a gasp for air or a sign of stress. It was a moment of stillness, of gathering my own gravity. In that quiet intake of breath, the entire dynamic of the room shifted. For the first time that night, a flicker of fear appeared. But it wasn't mine, it was theirs. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible change in the atmosphere, a tightening around the eyes of the general, a nervous twitch in the analyst's jaw. My silence was no longer passive. It became an active force in the room. It was the kind of silence that presses against your chest, making every breath feel expensive, every heartbeat a drumbeat marking an uncertain future. It was the silence of a man who held a power they couldn't quantify, couldn't command, and couldn't control. They had expected arguments, negotiations, perhaps even a capitulation. They had not expected this quiet defiance, this stillness. Across the sprawling war table, they watched me. Generals whose careers were built on predicting enemy movements. Analysts whose minds were trained to calculate every possible outcome in real time. Intelligence chiefs who could read a man's life story from a single bead of sweat. All of them, the most powerful figures in the nation's defense apparatus, were watching me, waiting, their own complex calculations running wild. What was he thinking? What would he do? Their world was one of action and reaction, of moves and countermoves. My inaction was a variable they hadn't accounted for, a wrench in their meticulously crafted machine. My mind wasn't racing. It was crystal clear. I thought about the technologies we had built. Starlink connecting the world, Neuralink bridging the gap between mind and machine, SpaceX opening up the heavens. These were tools born of a desire to elevate humanity, to solve our greatest challenges, to create a future that was inspiring. They were meant to be instruments of creation, of connection, of exploration. Now these men wanted to turn them into weapons. They wanted to take these keys to a better future and forge them into swords. The general, impatient with the silence, spoke again, his voice strained. "This isn't a debate, Elon. This is a matter of national security. China, Russia, they are not waiting. They are moving. They are weaponizing artificial intelligence, quantum computing, everything. We are in a race, and you are holding the key to the engine." I finally looked up, meeting his gaze directly. "A race to where, General?" My voice was calm even. "What's the finish line? Mutually assured digital destruction? A world where every piece of technology, from a car to a pacemaker, is a potential battlefield." The young analyst flinched as if my words had struck a nerve he'd been trying to numb. The director cut in, his voice smooth, persuasive. "We are the good guys, Mr. Musk. We are preserving freedom, democracy. The alternative is a world order dictated by authoritarian regimes. Your technology in our hands ensures the flame of liberty doesn't go out." "Liberty," I repeated the word, letting it echo in the quiet room. "Is liberty forcing a private citizen to turn his life's work into a weapon under threat of public ruin? Is that the freedom you're fighting for? The freedom to coerce?" The room fell silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. It was the uncomfortable silence that follows a truth that no one wants to acknowledge. They had come here expecting to leverage their power, their authority, their flag. They had underestimated the power of a simple, fundamental principle. I stood up slowly, my hands resting on the table. I started my companies to build a better future, a future where humanity is a multi-planetary species, where we solve sustainable energy, where we are more connected and understanding of one another. That is my mission. It is not, and never will be, to build better, faster ways for us to destroy each other. I looked at each of them in turn. The general, his face a mask of stone. The director, his expression unreadable but his posture rigid. The young analyst who now looked at me with a glimmer of something I could only describe as hope. You speak of patriotism, I continued. My patriotism is not to a single flag but to the human species. My duty is not to a government, but to the future of our civilization. If you want to win this new kind of war, don't ask for better weapons. Ask for a better world. Build something that is so compelling, so just, and so prosperous that no other system can compete. Win the hearts and minds of the world not through fear and dominance, but through inspiration and progress. I could see my words weren't changing their mission, but they were changing the calculus. They saw I was not a man who could be threatened or blackmailed. My wealth wasn't my primary driver. My allegiance was to a vision they couldn't touch. My answer is no, I said, the words clear and final. The technology is not for sale, and it is not for an arms race. It is for humanity. You can tell the world whatever you want. You can try to ruin me. But you will not have my creations for your war, and you should know, I added, my voice dropping slightly, that trying to take them by force would be a very, very bad idea. The systems are designed to protect themselves not just from foreign adversaries, but from any misuse. A new kind of fear now flickered in their eyes. The fear of the unknown. The fear of a power they didn't comprehend, one that wasn't controlled by government budgets or military commands. I turned and walked towards the door. No one moved to stop me. The heavy silence was my escort. As my hand touched the handle, I paused and looked back one last time. The future is a choice, I said. Not an inevitability. I've made mine. I suggest you think very carefully about yours. With that, I opened the door and stepped out, leaving the titans of a fading empire to sit in the heavy, expensive silence of their war room, contemplating the man who refused to build them a sword and instead offered them a starship. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this glimpse into a possible future, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more stories that challenge our thinking. Until next time, keep looking up. Elon Musk sat motionless, his fingertips just brushing against each other, forming a steeple. His gaze was locked on the sealed communication case resting on the table before him. That box wasn't just a piece of hardware. It was his lifeline to the world, his connection to the vast digital empires he had built. It represented his autonomy, his very freedom. But in this sterile, windowless room, surrounded by figures of immense power, the box symbolized something far greater. It was the centerpiece of a choice, a decision that history might never fully know the details of, but would feel the repercussions of forever. The silence stretched on, thick with unspoken tension. Every person in the room held their breath, waiting. Finally, the silence broke. Musk's voice was slow, deliberate, each word carrying the weight of his conviction. I built technology to expand humanity's freedom, he said, his voice surprisingly soft, yet filling the space, not to trade it for safety. Across the table, a general, his uniform adorned with a chest full of medals, felt his jaw tighten. The muscle in his cheek twitched. Safety is freedom, Mr. Musk, he countered, his voice a low growl of authority. There is no freedom for those who aren't safe. Elon's eyes lifted from the case, and for the first time he made direct contact with the general. His gaze was sharp, defiant, like polished steel. No, he stated, the single word cutting through the general's argument. Safety without freedom is a cage. A gilded one, perhaps, with all the comforts you can imagine, but a cage nonetheless. A ripple of unease, almost a physical wave, passed through the room. It wasn't anger that filled the air, not at this blatant defiance of authority. It was something deeper, something more primal. Fear, because the powerful people in that room understood a fundamental truth. The only thing harder than controlling immense power is trying to control someone who doesn't need what you can offer. They couldn't buy him. They couldn't threaten his position, because he had built his own world, his own power base, independent of theirs. An analyst, a woman with a calm demeanor and a steady voice who had been leading the briefing, stepped forward again. The professional mask she wore was cracking, desperation softening the edges of her tone. She tried a different approach, one of appeal rather than demand. "Mr. Musk," she began, her voice pleading, "we are trying to protect the nation, to protect everyone. The threats we face are existential. We need you. We need your systems." He turned his gaze to her, and for a moment, the steel in his eyes seemed to melt, replaced by a flicker of genuine compassion. He saw not just a government agent, but a person burdened by a heavy responsibility, trying to do what she believed was right. "I know," he said, his tone softening in response. "And I want to help. I truly do. But you can't fight darkness by dimming the world's brightest lights." He gestured vaguely, encompassing not just his own work, but the very idea of innovation and unrestricted progress. "You can't protect the village by burning it down first." He tapped the metal case again, the sound a soft metallic thud in the quiet room. This time the gesture was less defiant, more thoughtful. "What you're asking for," he continued, speaking to the entire room now, "is a key. A master key to everything. You say you'll only use it for good to stop the bad guys. But history has a funny way of redefining who the bad guys are. Power is a corrupting force. Absolute power, the kind you're asking for, doesn't just corrupt absolutely. It attracts the absolute worst people to wield it." The general shifted in his seat. "This is not a philosophical debate. This is a matter of national security. We have credible intelligence." Musk held up a hand, and surprisingly, the general stopped talking. "I've seen the intelligence. I've seen data you haven't even processed yet. The threat is real. I'm not disputing that. What I am disputing is the method. You want to build a panopticon, a system of total surveillance believing you can control it. But you can't. No one can. A system designed to watch everyone, for any reason, will inevitably be turned against the very people it was meant to protect." He leaned forward slightly, his passion now evident. "Think about the precedent you set. Today it's to stop a foreign threat. Tomorrow it's to stop domestic dissent. The day after, it's to enforce ideological conformity. The line keeps moving, and every time it moves, a piece of freedom is chipped away. You start by wanting to read the emails of terrorists, and you end up policing the thoughts of ordinary citizens. The path to tyranny is paved with good intentions and emergency measures that become permanent." The analyst spoke again, her voice laced with frustration. "So what's your solution? We just let the threat materialize? We let disaster strike because we're afraid of the tools that could prevent it?" "No," Musk replied instantly. "My solution is to be smarter, to be faster, to be better. We fight fire with water, not with a bigger fire. We build systems that are inherently more secure, more resilient. We create decentralized networks that can't be taken down by a single point of failure. We innovate our way out of the problem. We don't regulate our way into a new one. Instead of a master key, we make stronger locks for everyone. We empower individuals to be secure, rather than making them dependent on a central authority for their safety." He looked around the room, at the faces of the military leaders, the intelligence officers, the political strategists. "You see this technology," he said, gesturing to the case, "and you see a weapon, a tool for control. I see a tool for liberation, a way to connect humanity, to elevate our collective consciousness, to solve problems we once thought unsolvable. You want to turn my greatest contribution to human freedom into its most effective prison. I will not be the architect of that prison." A long moment of silence followed. The weight of his words hung in the air. He wasn't just refusing an order. He was challenging their entire worldview. He was a variable they couldn't solve, an entity operating on a different set of principles. Finally, With a sigh that seemed to carry the exhaustion of his long-held convictions, he pushed the sealed case across the polished table. It slid to a stop, just in front of the general. "The choice is yours," Musk said, his voice now calm and resolved. "You can try to take it. You can try to force my hand. You'll probably fail, but you can try, and in doing so, you will become the very thing you claim to be fighting against." He stood up, his tall frame seeming to take up all the oxygen in the room. "Or," he said, his eyes meeting the general's one last time, "you can work with me, not as a subordinate but as a partner, to build a safer world without sacrificing the freedom that makes it worth living in." He turned and walked toward the door, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The choice had been presented. The brightest light in the room had refused to be dimmed. And now, the custodians of the shadows had to decide whether they would try to extinguish it or learn to see by its glow. The future of freedom wasn't in that box. It was in their answer. If my technology becomes government property, then it's not innovation anymore, it's a weapon. And eventually, every weapon gets fired. Those words, spoken with a quiet intensity, hung in the sterile air of the secure government briefing room. They weren't a shout, not a declaration of war, but they hit harder than any threat could. Across the polished mahogany table, a cyber admiral, a man whose career was built on calculating risks and anticipating threats, leaned forward, his decorated uniform creaking softly. "We cannot afford idealism," he stated, his voice a low growl of pragmatism. The implication was clear. In a world of threats, idealism is a luxury, a dangerous one. Elon didn't blink. He met the admiral's gaze, his own expression unreadable but firm. "And we cannot afford fear disguised as leadership." The room stilled. The air, already thick with tension, seemed to solidify. The half-dozen other officials, men and women accustomed to high-stakes negotiations, shifted uncomfortably. They had expected a battle of egos, a negotiation over contracts and control. They hadn't expected this, a philosophical showdown. He wasn't being reckless, and deep down, they knew it. He was being honest. He was drawing a line not just in the sand, but in the very fabric of progress. For Elon, this wasn't just about code or satellites. It was about the soul of invention. As he sat there, facing the immense pressure of national security, images tore through his mind like frantic clips in a documentary. He saw a much younger version of himself, curled up on a lumpy beanbag chair in a rented office, the hum of servers his only lullaby. It was cheaper than an apartment, and every dollar saved was another day the dream stayed alive. He saw the endless nights, the 20-hour days fueled by lukewarm coffee and sheer willpower, trying to wrestle the future into existence at Tesla, while the whispers of investors predicting his failure echoed like a relentless curse. He saw the fireballs in the sky, his rockets disintegrating against the blue canvas, a multi-million-dollar testament to the brutal physics of ambition. He could still hear the laughter of critics, the smug "I told you so" from armchair experts who had never risked anything more than a cynical tweet. They had called him a charlatan, a dreamer, a fool destined for bankruptcy. But then, the real in his mind shifted. The fiery explosions gave way to a different kind of light. He saw the triumphant roar of a Falcon 9 booster landing perfectly on a drone ship in the middle of the ocean, a ballet of fire and precision that many had sworn was impossible. He saw the face of the first astronaut to ride in a Dragon capsule, a look of pure, unadulterated awe as they broke through the atmosphere. He saw the silent, elegant dance of thousands of Starlink satellites, weaving a net of connectivity around the globe, promising to bring the world closer together. He saw the smiles on the faces of new Tesla owners, people who weren't just buying a car but buying into a vision of a cleaner, more sustainable future. Each of those moments, the failures and the triumphs, were bricks in the foundation of his conviction. They weren't just business milestones. They were battles fought and won for the sake of an idea. The idea that technology should uplift, connect, and empower, not control. The admiral sighed, a sound of weary patience. Mr. Musk, you're a brilliant man, no one denies that, but you're thinking like an engineer. We have to think like guardians. An adversary could exploit your systems, turn your own network against us. We need oversight. We need the keys. The keys, Admiral. Elon's voice was sharp now. Let's be clear about what you're asking for. You're not asking for a key. You're asking for a master key, a backdoor. And the first rule of cybersecurity, a rule you, of all people, should know, is that a backdoor for the good guys is just a door for the bad guys. It's a vulnerability by design. You'd be asking me to intentionally cripple my own creation. He stood up, pacing slowly behind his chair. Think about it. You want to control this for national security. What happens when the definition of national security changes? What happens when it's used not to stop an external threat, but to monitor your own citizens? To stifle dissent? To enforce conformity? You say it won't happen. History says it always does. Power is a gravitational force. It pulls everything toward it. He gestured around the windowless room. This room, this conversation, and this is how it starts. With reasonable men making what they believe are reasonable requests for the greater good. But the road to tyranny is paved with reasonable requests. You're not just asking for my technology. You're asking me to betray the very reason I built it. To give individuals more freedom, not less. To connect the disconnected. To give a voice to the voiceless. To open up the world. Handing you the power to shut that down on a whim? That's not a compromise, that's a surrender. A woman in a sharp suit, a legal advisor, spoke up. There would be legal frameworks, warrants, judicial oversight. Elon laughed, a short, humorless sound. Frameworks that can be rewritten, oversight that can be bypassed with a state secret stamp. We've all seen it happen. You're asking me to trust a system. I don't trust systems. I trust principles. And the principle here is that power, especially the power to control information, should be decentralized. It should be in the hands of the many, not the few. Because the few, no matter how well-intentioned, will eventually be tempted to abuse it. He stopped pacing and looked directly at the Admiral again, his gaze piercing. My technology saved lives in Ukraine when their communications were cut. It's keeping people online in Iran as they fight for their freedom. It's a lifeline. You want me to give you the switch to turn that lifeline off. Forgive me, Admiral, but my conscience won't allow it. My legacy will not be that I built a cage no matter how gilded you make it. He was thinking of the future. Not the next quarter's earnings or the next election cycle, but decades, centuries from now. He envisioned a future on Mars, a new branch of civilization. Would it be founded on the principles of freedom and exploration? Or would it be an extension of the same terrestrial fears and controls? The choices made here, in this room, would echo across planets. So what is your proposal? The Admiral asked, his voice strained. That we just trust you? Trust that your private company will always act in the nation's best interest? No, Elon replied, returning to his seat. You don't have to trust me. You have to trust the principles of an open, secure, and decentralized network. Work with me. Let's build protocols for emergencies, transparent ones that don't involve a secret master key. Let's create a partnership based on shared goals, not on a power grab. Let's lead with innovation, not with fear. Show the world that strength doesn't come from control, but from resilience and freedom. He leaned forward, mirroring the Admiral's posture from the beginning. But his was an offer, not a demand. I built this to connect humanity, Admiral, not to chain it. Help me keep that promise. That is a legacy worth fighting for. The room was silent again, but this time, the silence was different. It wasn't the stillness of a standoff. It was the quiet of contemplation, the weight of his words, of his journey from a beanbag on the floor to this very moment filled the space. It was the sound of minds beginning to change, of fear beginning to give way, just a little, to a flicker of hope. And in that flicker, the future of innovation, and perhaps much more, hung in the balance. Thank you so much for watching. This story is a dramatization, but it explores the very real and complex questions at the heart of technology: freedom, And power, what do you think? Where should the line be drawn? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy digging into these big ideas, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more content. It helps the channel more than you know. We'll see you in the next one. Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a story that feels like it has been ripped straight from a science fiction blockbuster, but it's happening right here, right now. It's a tale of ambition, technology, and a high-stakes standoff that could reshape our world. At the heart of it all is a single, polarizing figure, Elon Musk. Picture this. A Falcon 9 rocket, a fiery spear against the sky, returns to Earth. Its landing legs touch down with the grace of a whisper, a promise from a future many of us only dream of. That single moment wasn't just a technological marvel, it was a spark. Suddenly, kids weren't just idolizing athletes or movie stars. They were wearing SpaceX shirts, their eyes bright with a new kind of ambition. They wanted to be the ones building the future, the engineers and scientists, not just the ones commentating on it. This wasn't just about reaching for the stars. It was about connecting the Earth. Fast forward to the war-torn cities of Ukraine. Amidst the chaos and rubble, a lifeline. Soldiers separated from their loved ones could see their families' faces, hear their voices. A small constellation of satellites, Starlink, kept the light of communication alive when everything else had gone dark. Technology, for all its complexities and potential for misuse, was saving lives, preserving human connection in the face of destruction. It's in these moments you can almost hear the guiding philosophy, a whisper that seems to echo from Musk himself. The future belongs to the brave. It's a powerful sentiment, the idea that progress demands courage, that to build a better tomorrow, we must risk the comfort of today. It is the driving force behind landing rockets on ocean platforms and wiring the globe with internet from space. But bravery is often tested not by the vacuum of space but by the corridors of power right here on Earth. Imagine a scene. A sterile, high-security room. Elon Musk sits at a table. Across from him, a general, his face etched with grim reality. He slams a thick folder down. The sound cuts through the silence. Inside that folder isn't speculation. It's cold, hard intelligence. Classified reports detailing a looming threat. It's a new kind of warfare, one fought not with soldiers and tanks, but with ones and zeros. The documents show infiltration data, hostile signals intercepted from a rival nation. A detailed plan to launch a devastating cyber attack, to sever the digital arteries that keep our society functioning. The goal? To unleash swarms of autonomous machines to collapse economies and to sow chaos on an unimaginable scale. The general's voice is low, but it carries the weight of the world. He looks Musk dead in the eye. He points to the data, to the maps pulsing with red alerts like a body on the verge of a catastrophic failure. Your network, he says, his voice rising with urgency, is the key. If we don't control it, they will weaponize it against us, against our people, against everything. The accusation hangs in the air, thick and heavy. The very same network that connected Ukrainian families is now seen as a potential weapon that could be turned against its creators. Elon stares at the documents. He sees the chaos encoded in the lines of text, the digital battlefields laid bare. He doesn't deny the threat. He's a man who understands systems, who understands risk. He can feel the gravity of the situation in his bones. But fear has never been his compass. His entire career has been a series of bets against the odds, of pushing forward when everyone else said to stop. This is the ultimate dilemma. On one side, a government demanding control in the name of national security. On the other, the principle of a free and open global network, a tool for connection and empowerment. To yield control is to compromise the very ideal that Starlink was built upon. But to refuse could mean being held responsible for a catastrophe. This isn't just about one man or one company anymore. It's a question for all of us in the 21st century. How much freedom are we willing to trade for security? Who do we trust with the keys to our digital world? The government, with its mandate to protect, or the innovators, with their vision to connect? The general's words represent a legitimate fear. A sophisticated cyber attack using a network like Starlink could be devastating. It could disrupt power grids, financial markets, and military communications. From a national security perspective, the demand to control such a powerful asset is not just reasonable, it's seen as essential. They are looking at the worst-case scenario and trying to prevent it. They see a private entity controlling a piece of infrastructure so vital it has become a matter of state security. But Musk's hesitation is just as understandable. Handing over the keys, creating a backdoor for one government, sets a dangerous precedent. What happens when another government demands the same access? And another? The network's promise of a free, global internet would be shattered. It would become a tool of surveillance and control, partitioned by digital borders, the exact opposite of its intended purpose. He is likely thinking about the second and third order effects. What does this mean for the future of private innovation in space and communications? Does every groundbreaking technology now come with an asterisk, subject to government takeover? This is the tightrope walk. The path forward is shrouded in fog. Does he cooperate and risk the integrity of his creation? Or does he stand firm on his principles and risk being blamed for a potential disaster? This moment is a microcosm of the great technological debates of our time. It's about privacy versus security, innovation versus regulation, individual vision versus collective safety. The story is still unfolding, and the ending has yet to be written, but it forces us to confront these uncomfortable questions head-on. The technology that connects us also makes us vulnerable. The tools that empower us can also be used to control us. And the future, it seems, won't just belong to the brave. It will be shaped by the difficult choices they are forced to make in rooms just like that one. What do you think? It's a complex issue with no easy answers. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Which side of this dilemma do you lean towards? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content that explores the intersection of technology, power, and our shared future. We'll see you in the next one. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a story, a moment that feels like it's pulled straight from a blockbuster movie, but it speaks volumes about conviction, leadership, and the power of a single, unwavering vision. It's a tale that pits individual purpose against institutional pressure, and it asks a fundamental question. What does it mean to do the right thing when the stakes are higher than ever? So, grab your coffee, settle in, and let's explore this powerful narrative together. Imagine a sterile, windowless room, the kind where decisions that shape the world are made in secret. The air is thick with tension. On one side, you have the establishment, personified by an intelligence director. He's a man who wields power like a weapon, accustomed to getting his way. On the other side, a lone figure, let's call him Elon, representing innovation, a future that refuses to be constrained. The director steps forward, his voice a low, threatening rumble, dripping with authority. He lays down the ultimatum. If you walk away from this room without signing, you will have enemies. Powerful ones. This is the classic fork in the road. It's the moment where most people would fold. The threat isn't just a suggestion, it's a promise of hardship, of doors closing, of a life spent looking over your shoulder. The pressure is immense. The easy path is to sign the paper, to compromise, to play the game by their rules. It's the safe choice. But great stories, and indeed, great leaps in progress, are rarely born from the safe choice. Instead of recoiling, Elon does the unexpected. He closes the distance. He steps toward the director, getting so close that the man's confident posture falters, his breath catching in his throat. It's a masterful reversal of power. He's not using physical intimidation, but the sheer force of his conviction. The security guards in the room sense the shift, their muscles tense, hands inching towards their weapons. The room is a powder keg, and Elon just lit a match. Yet he remains perfectly calm. It's a specific kind of calm, not one of ignorance or arrogance, but the tranquility of someone who knows their purpose, who has a North Star so bright that the surrounding darkness doesn't matter. Then he speaks. Powerful enemies, he says, his voice steady, are earned by doing the right thing. Let that sink in for a moment. He's not just deflecting the threat, he's reframing it. He's turning what was meant to be a mark of shame into a badge of honor. He is saying that if the powerful people are his enemies for choosing the right path, then he welcomes that enmity. It's a profound statement about integrity. How many of us in our own lives have faced smaller versions of this dilemma? The pressure to agree with the group, to stay silent when we should speak up, to take the path of least resistance. This moment is a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about avoiding conflict, but about choosing the right conflicts. There's a beat of silence. The tension is almost unbearable. Then Elon says, "I'll cooperate." You can practically hear the collective sigh of relief in the room. The director thinks he's won. The guards relax, just slightly. They've reeled him in. He's seen reason. But they've fundamentally misunderstood the man they're dealing with, because he isn't finished. With perfect timing, he adds the crucial condition. But not under your control. Boom. The tension snaps right back, stronger than before. It's like a cable under immense pressure finally giving way. He hasn't just refused to sign. He's rejected the very premise of their authority over his mission. He's offering collaboration, not submission. And then he delivers the line that elevates the entire exchange from a personal standoff to a global philosophy. "I will help defend humanity," he declares, "not just America. Because the world rises or falls together." This is the core of his argument. He's challenging the very idea of nationalistic boundaries in the face of existential threats. In an age of global challenges, climate change, pandemics, resource scarcity, the idea that one nation can succeed while others fail is becoming increasingly obsolete. His vision is bigger. It's a vision of shared destiny, of a unified human race. He's not being anti-America, he's being pro-humanity. He's arguing that true defense, true security lies in cooperation and lifting everyone up, not in hoarding power and resources for one group. It's a message that resonates deeply today, a call for us to think beyond our borders and recognize our interconnectedness. The director is left speechless, his power play completely dismantled. All he can do is narrow his eyes and state the obvious. You were choosing risk. He sees it as a reckless gamble, a foolish defiance of a system that will crush him. But again, Elon reframes the narrative with two simple, devastatingly powerful words. He looks at the director, his voice now soft, but filled with unshakable certainty, and says, "No, I'm choosing humanity." What can you say to that? How do you argue against someone who has aligned themselves with the future of our entire species? The director has no counter. His threats, his power, his entire framework is rendered meaningless. And in that moment, the system blinks. They don't arrest him. There's no dramatic takedown. They don't even salute him or acknowledge his victory. They simply step aside. Because in their hearts, even if they can't admit it, they know he's right. They understand a fundamental truth. You can't imprison the future. You can't put an idea in handcuffs. Progress, true progress, cannot be contained by old structures. The scene doesn't end there. It pivots. Elon takes back his device case, the symbol of his work and his vision. But he doesn't retreat into his own world. He doesn't just walk away a lone victor. Instead, he turns to a minor character in the room, a young analyst who has been witnessing this entire exchange. She's probably been trained to follow orders, to keep her head down, to be a cog in the machine. But she has just seen the machine challenged and defeated by a single person's will. He looks at her and says, "Come see me at SpaceX tomorrow. We're going to build something better." It's not a command. It's an invitation to be part of the solution, to leave the world of threats and control for a world of creation and possibility. He isn't just focused on defeating the old system. He's actively recruiting for the new one. He's building his team, not with threats, but with inspiration, and the analyst's reaction says it all. She nods, we're told, stunned, inspired, changed. In that one moment, her entire world has been reoriented. She's seen what's possible. This final part is, for me, the most important lesson of the story. True leadership isn't just about standing up to the opposition. It's about inspiring others to join you in building the alternative. It's about passing the torch, planting seeds of change, and empowering the next generation. Elon didn't just win an argument in a room. He ignited a spark in someone who will now carry that fire forward. He didn't just choose humanity. He invited others to choose it with him. So, what can we take away from this? It's a story that champions courage in the face of overwhelming pressure. It's a call to think globally and act with integrity. And most of all, it's a reminder that the most powerful force for change isn't brute strength or political control, but a compelling vision for a better future and the courage to invite others to help you build it. It teaches us that powerful enemies might be a sign you're on the right track, and that choosing humanity is never the risky choice. It's the only choice we have. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive today. What did you think of this story? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in that situation? As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration. Until next time, stay curious and keep choosing humanity. The intelligence director stepped forward, his voice low, trembling with a mixture of anger and authority. If you walk away from this room without signing, he warned, his words like cold steel, you will have enemies. Powerful ones. The air in the room grew thick, heavy with unspoken threats. Every eye was locked on Elon, waiting for him to buckle, to concede. But he didn't. Instead, Elon moved forward. He closed the distance between them, stepping into the director's personal space, close enough to feel the man's breath hitch in his throat. Security personnel around the room shifted their weight, muscles tensing, hands inching closer to their weapons. Yet amidst this storm of tension, Elon was an island of calm. It wasn't the calm of arrogance, but the deep, unshakable serenity of someone who knows their purpose, someone who has weighed the consequences and found their conviction heavier. Powerful enemies, Elon said, his voice quiet but resonant, cutting through the silence, are earned by doing the right thing. He let the words hang in the air, a direct challenge to the authority that sought to control him. He then took a small step back, giving the room a moment to breathe. I'll cooperate, he stated simply. A collective, almost inaudible sigh of relief swept through the room. The director's shoulders relaxed slightly, a flicker of triumph in his eyes. They thought they had won. They thought he had bent to their will. But then, Elon delivered the final blow. But not under your control, he finished. The tension didn't just return. It snapped back with the force of a high-tension cable breaking under immense pressure. The director's face hardened, the brief relief replaced by a cold fury. Elon continued, his gaze sweeping across the room, meeting the eyes of everyone present, from the director to the junior agents. I will help defend humanity, not just America. He let that sink in. Because the world rises or falls together, this wasn't about patriotism for one nation. It was about survival for the entire species. He was drawing a line in the sand, not between countries, but between a controlled, fractured future and a unified, free one. The director's eyes narrowed into slits. The threat was clear now, no longer veiled in diplomatic language. You're choosing risk, he spat out, the words laced with venom. He was telling Elon he was choosing to be a target, an obstacle to be removed. Elon's response was soft, almost a whisper, yet it carried the weight of a profound truth. No, he replied, a faint, knowing smile touching his lips. I'm choosing humanity. For a long moment, nobody moved. The air crackled with possibilities. They could arrest him. They could detain him. The power in that room was absolute, or so it seemed, but they did neither. They didn't salute him, they didn't endorse him, but they didn't stop him either. One by one, the security guards, the agents, the men of power, simply stepped aside. They cleared a path. Why? Because deep down, in the part of themselves that still understood truth, they knew You can't imprison an idea whose time has come. You can't put handcuffs on progress. You can't imprison the future. Elon walked back to the table and picked up the case containing his device, the very thing they had tried to leverage against him. He didn't open it. The technology inside was secondary to the principle he had just established. His victory wasn't in the tech. It was in the choice he had made for all of them. But he wasn't finished. He turned, his eyes finding the young analyst who had been watching the entire exchange, her expression a mix of terror and awe. She was just a cog in this massive machine, but in her eyes he saw a spark, the same spark that drove him. He walked over to her. "Come see me at SpaceX tomorrow," he said, his voice now warm, encouraging. "We're going to build something better." It wasn't just an invitation. It was a calling, a chance to be part of something greater than fear, greater than control. The young analyst could only nod, her mind reeling. She was stunned, inspired, and in that single moment, irrevocably changed. She had just witnessed one man stand against the system and win, not with force but with a simple, powerful idea. And now, she was invited to help build that future. As Elon walked out of the room, leaving the relics of the old power structure in his wake, it was clear that this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. A new chapter for humanity was about to be written, not in the shadowed halls of power, but in the bright open workshops where dreams are built and launched into the stars. What do you think? Is this the kind of leader the world needs right now? Someone who stands for all of us? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss what's coming next. See you in the future. Scene opens on a tense, dimly lit room. A man is walking out. He's either going to save the world or change it beyond recognition. The words hung in the air, heavy with uncertainty, spoken by a general whose face was etched with a lifetime of hard decisions. In the corner, the intelligence director, a man who dealt in shadows and secrets, watched the figure disappear through the heavy steel door. "Sometimes," he murmured to no one in particular, "those are the same thing." The scene shifts. The man steps out of a bunker into a vast desert at night. The moment the bunker doors groaned open, the desert wind met him. It wasn't a harsh wind, but a persistent one carrying the scent of sand and ancient stone. He tilted his head back, and the night sky unfolded above him, a breathtaking canvas of stars, stretching from horizon to horizon like a million tiny, hopeful embers scattered across an infinite darkness. He took a deep, deliberate breath, filling his lungs with the air of this pivotal moment. It was the air of choice, the air of profound uncertainty, the air of a destiny he was about to seize. A helicopter waited nearby, its rotors beginning to stir the still night air, a modern chariot ready to carry him away. But he didn't move towards it just yet. He paused, a solitary figure against the immense backdrop of the desert and the cosmos. His gaze was fixed on the stars as if seeking an answer or perhaps just a moment of clarity. "We don't get to choose the challenges," he whispered, his voice almost lost to the wind. It was a thought spoken to himself, a mantra to steady his soul. Then, his voice gained strength, resonating with a newfound conviction. "But we choose what they turn us into." He lowered his gaze, his eyes now sharp and focused. "And I choose to build, not fear." He finally turned towards the waiting helicopter, his steps now firm, each one a declaration. He paused one last time at the open door, looking back as if addressing the entire world, and everyone in it who had ever faced an impossible choice. "Life is full of threats," he declared, his voice ringing with authority. "But courage isn't about choosing sides. It's about choosing humanity." With that, he stepped into the helicopter. The door slid shut, and the machine lifted gracefully into the darkness, a dark shape ascending against the star-dusted sky. He wasn't running from the future, he was flying straight into its heart, and far below, hidden in the deep shadows of a desert canyon, a secret facility pulsed with light and power. Inside, the world's most influential people, generals, politicians, scientists, and financiers, were gathered. They stood before massive screens, their faces illuminated by the single blinking light of the ascending helicopter. They watched it disappear into the night, their collective breath held in a silent, agonizing suspense. They were left to wonder, to hope, to fear. Had they just witnessed the beginning of salvation? Or had they just unleashed the birth of a new kind of war? The line between the two had never seemed so thin, and the fate of the world now rested on the wings of that lone helicopter, flying into the unknown. What does it truly mean to make a choice that could redefine everything? When the stakes are this high, is there a right answer? Or is there only the path you choose and the world you create in its wake? These are the questions that linger in the desert air, long after the sound of the rotors has faded. The world is watching, waiting for the dawn to see what future he has chosen for them all. What would you choose? If this story sparked something in you, if you find yourself pondering these questions, then you're in the right place. We dive deep into stories like this every week, exploring the choices that define us and our world. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you do not miss our next journey into the heart of what it means to be human. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.